And here we are with the next unveiling of the college football playoff rankings. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. My apologies for the false alert earlier tonight because I didn't know about these moronic basketball games that were being played. So anyway, we are accustomed to the 7 o'clock Eastern time unveiling of the college football playoff rankings, but they're playing basketball game tonight, and therefore we've got to have a guessing game as to when the rankings will be revealed. So I believe they've been revealed, although I do not see them online. And I got to say, I gave every intent because I've dealt with this, of course. We have dealt with this each and every year during the one weekend where they have that opening weekend basketball business. And I understand sporting events and television, and we cannot know the exact time when the games will be over and the between games unveiling will occur. And I got to say, I had so much focus on this event, so much focus on what was going to happen and when the rankings would be revealed, that from the time that I had to shut down the previous stream and then prepare for thinking that, okay, I got to track the end of this game, which I've done many years before, got to track the end of this game, that I will watch the end of the game, and then obviously I'll be able to know. Boom, completely out of my mind, had no idea, thought, okay, we'll do 9 o'clock, and here we are. So, all right, let's get to the rankings if we can. I did not see the rankings, and therefore I'm trying to find those online. And based on the last refresher on ESPN, we don't have any rankings yet. I don't know if they're still in progress. I didn't see them online. Let me give that to one quick shout, and we'll give it one quick look, and then we will take your calls. Keep in mind, we got Matt Zemek stopping by from Trojans Wire. We kind of slammed into a little of a programming issue because we do our USC show on Tuesday nights here at the Voice of College Football. And we were all set to do our USC show, and it dawned on me, these are going to converge because of this basketball situation where I was expecting to have some time between both of them. So we've got Matt Zemek standing by at some point, and as soon as Matt is available, of course, we will give him preference to do the college football playoff rankings portion of this, and then we'll go right into the USC portion of our show as well. Are the rankings still on? Anybody? Let me know if the rankings are still on. Let's see. It does not appear so. It looks like they're in break right this second, and it looks like they're going to the second basketball game, I would appear. So it appears as though yes, I understand the rankings or the library is on here, but I'm not going to run through a full 20 minutes to half hour. So we will rely on you until they post the rankings online, because it appears as though actually that first game must have been pretty quick, because this ranking show, I believe, was supposed to be at approximately 9 o'clock Eastern, but that first game must have slid by pretty fast. All right. Again, we got Matt Zemek standing by from Trojans Wire, and as soon as he gets here, we will cut straight to Matt. But as it stands right now, you are front and center. The real MVP, what's going on?
Mark, I posted a link to the rankings in the private chat.
Excellent.
The college football committee is very quick at posting the rankings. So there's a few things that surprised me about the rankings. And one of them is Indiana and BYU both being moved up significantly. But Indiana, the committee is telling their hands they are not confident in Indiana at all, because they are ranked as the fourth highest Big Ten team at the number 5 seed. And this is telling me, Mark, that the committee has no belief in Indiana. They're a fraudulent team. And if they get blown out by Ohio State, they're just going to completely crater. Because if you're already behind a one-loss team in your own conference, doesn't set up well. What do you think about that, Mark?
Okay, so I can't think too quickly here because I'm just looking at it right now. So Oregon's 1, Ohio State's number 2, Texas moves up to 3, Penn State's at 4. Then we've got Indiana at number 5. Indiana was 8 last week, so they've moved ahead of Miami and some other teams, obviously, that don't
Georgia and Ole Miss
right this second. Georgia and who?
Not Ole Miss. Was it BYU?
It must have been. No, I think Indiana was 8 and BYU was 9. Who else lost last weekend? So they moved ahead of Georgia and Miami. Regardless, let's get a better look at this. So they honored the Indiana movement here. So they got Indiana behind Penn State. So what is the fear here? If Indiana loses to Ohio State,
they're going to get crushed by Ohio State, and they're going to fall even further behind because the committee is telling us, hey, we don't believe in Indiana. Indiana is already behind a team they haven't even played yet. And we know Penn State is worse than Ohio State. That's baked into the cake.
Well, so hopefully they're not deducing all that based on what you're saying. Hopefully,
Mark, I believe they're
evaluating resumes.
Well,
and Ohio State's got a better resume than Indiana is what they're telling us, and they do.
Well, I'm not talking about the Ohio State-Indiana comparison. I'm talking about the Penn State versus Indiana comparison. Penn State, we know, is worse than Ohio State. We do not know for sure Indiana is worse than Ohio State.
Yes.
So, therefore, why did the committee put Indiana behind Penn State? It's because the committee doesn't value Indiana. Why? Because they are a somewhat fraudulent football team who has played nobody good.
Oh, well, no. So your last statement, that the end, your tail end of the statement, that's what we need to look at right there, that they haven't played anyone good. Not that they're fraudulent or anything like that necessarily. Penn State has a better resume than Indiana based on the committee's observation, based on their review of you've got wins against West Virginia, that Indiana, of course, didn't play anybody outside the conference. And Penn State also, let's see, in conference has a Wisconsin win, has a Ohio State loss that you can value as better than any Indiana win. And I think that's what it comes down to. Penn State played Ohio State down to the final minute of play, and Indiana doesn't have a win that's as good as Penn State's loss.
Right, I agree with you, and I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. But I'm just saying, what is the committee going to do if Indiana loses by 40 to Ohio State? That's all I'm throwing out there. Another thing that I hate about these rankings, Mark, is there's a projection element we can guarantee is in the cake because they have Miami as the 9 seed and the 3 seed in the ACC championship game. So the committee does not have the SMU Mustangs in the playoffs. This tells us for sure the committee believes Miami is going to win the ACC championship game. I do not believe the committee should be projecting who is going to win conferences. I believe they should just take the first team in the standings and put them in and then rank the teams accordingly. But that's clearly not what the committee is doing.
So are you telling me that SMU is automatically a higher ranked team in your mind than Miami just because they're higher in the conference standings?
No, according to the rules of this format, the 4 ranked conference championships automatically get in. So if this is our format, then you need to put the 4 ranked conference championships 1, 2, 3, and 4. Not rank them 1, 2, 3, and 4, but have them to where SMU is automatically in there. No. Just the top teams. Why? Because we shouldn't project it out.
They're not projecting any. No. Just because you're in first place in a conference doesn't mean you have the best resume.
No. I'm not saying that. But the goal to get to one of the top 4 spots, 1 through 4, is you have to win your conference. What team in the ACC is most likely to win their conference? It's the SMU Mustangs.
That's projection.
How's that projection?
Shouldn't be into projection. They're into evaluating a current resume.
Right. I mean, my thing is, I understand that. But SMU is 5-0 in the ACC. Miami is not 5-0 in the ACC. Therefore, if you're saying we have these automatic qualifying spots and it's based on who wins your conference, who is currently higher ranked.
No.
I don't believe SMU is a better team than Miami, and I believe Miami should be higher ranked.
No, I'm not talking about that necessarily. Here's my thought, Daryl. So you were saying that regardless that every team that is in first place in each conference should be the highest ranked team in that conference, regardless.
Yes.
That doesn't mean they've got the best resume.
That's correct, but that's not what it's about for the first 4 seats. It's not about who's the best resume.
They're ranking the teams in the country. They're not making a playoff field. They are ranking the teams in the country with the understanding that they will then be elevated to those positions if they win conference championships. Okay. So, for example, let's just say that at the end of the season, based on whatever the results are and how impressive these teams are, that Miami is number 6 at the end of the regular season, and SMU's number 13. But obviously, after SMU wins that game, let's say this, that even after SMU wins that game, let's put in a more egregious example. Let's say Miami was undefeated for the entire season, and they went 12-0, and SMU went 8-4. And their resumes weren't comparable, but SMU went, let's say, 7-1 or 6-2 in the conference, and they finished in second place. Therefore, they made it to the ACC championship game. Let's say the committee had Miami ranked number 1 in the country, and SMU was number 22 in the country. Even after the SMU win in the conference championship game, the committee can still rank the loser of the conference championship game ahead of the conference championship game winner, but the rules of the playoff elevate the winner of the conference regardless of where they're ranked. It doesn't matter where they're ranked. Once you win the conference, then you slot to whatever conference seed that you have as a champion.
Okay, maybe I'm miscommunicating my point. My point is
what I just said. Did that make sense?
Oh, it 100% makes sense. Right. My thing is, because these rankings really don't matter for this week. It's all about what will it currently be, and all this is going to change. My current thing is, yes, SMU should be ranked behind Miami. But if this is a projection of what the playoff field is going to look like, then have at the SMU Mustangs as the 13th seed, but put them in the 3 spot. I think that would be currently a more accurate representation of what the playoff field would look like in this very moment.
I still think we're not connecting here. I think we're understanding each other. I believe I get your point, and I'm pretty sure that you get my point, but I still disagree with you because
that's fine. But at least you understand the validity of my argument.
The rankings are the rankings, regardless of who's in what position in what league, and then the conference championship will take care of that position.
I understand that, Mark. Do you understand my perspective of the situation, though?
I think not. You're thinking that SMU should just automatically be ranked ahead of Miami.
No, not ranked ahead of Miami. Not ranked.
I know they're not. But you think that they should just because they're in first place in the ACC.
No. Don't even have them ranked ahead of them. Just when they fill out the bracket on ESPN, just have them in the 3 spot. Similar to Boise State.
You're going to a bracket that I haven't seen. You're talking about the bracket. We're looking at the rankings.
Right. So when ESPN has this massive bracket and how they fill in the teams.
Okay.
So the visualization of that is SMU's currently on the outside looking in.
I got you. You are saying that SMU, so these things can be both exist at the same time, that Miami's a higher ranked team based on their resume, but SMU has a better chance of reaching and therefore winning the ACC championship than Miami. And so that's you're correct. Saying that should be represented in the brackets. This is where the disconnect was, but I didn't hear your translation into a bracket. Okay. Got it.
Well, that was my failure to communicate it, not you missing it.
You're good. You're good. You may have stated that clearly. I just missed it. But the transition into the bracket, I'm not saying that you're 100% correct, but I certainly get your perspective. And I would tend to agree with you that I want to see how these rankings translate into the bracket based on where we stand in the season right now, with Oregon leading the Big Ten, SMU leading the ACC, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yes.
Right. That's my point. That's my point. So And I think that would give us, because an example of this is Ole Miss is currently the last team in at 11. They would actually be on the outside looking in if you put SMU as the 3 seed, which would be interesting because Georgia is also the first team out currently at the 12 seed mark. I don't. It feels like there's going to be a massive logjam of SEC teams at 10-2 at the end of the year with 4, 5, or 6 of them. I feel like I don't see the committee splitting it halfway down the middle. I think they all get in, but they're all going to have to play on the road. Do you think they're going to split them halfway down the middle?
They're going to split who halfway down the middle?
Conglomerate of Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, maybe even Texas and Texas A&M.
No, they need to do their due diligence to separate their resumes.
I get it, Mark, but you have a lot more faith in the committee than I do that they're willing to.
No, I'm holding them accountable for their role. I'm not saying that there aren't politics involved. I'm not denying that at all, but I'm just telling you this is my expectation that if 6 teams from the SEC tie at 10-2 in regards to a record, that of course they have to occupy the automatic berths. But once they're past that, hey, if the next 6 teams are all SEC teams, or the next 5 or whatever the number, they need to honor that. Or if it's razor close between 3 of them, and then Indiana's sandwiched in there with whatever resume evaluation the committee has, and then these other SEC teams, and it's still razor thin between Ole Miss and Tennessee. I'm trying to select 2 teams in the SEC that didn't play. Ole Miss and Tennessee, that their resumes are razor close, but so is Indiana's. And the committee believes that Tennessee is 9 and Tennessee's 10 and Indiana's 11 and Ole Miss is 12. And Ole Miss, see ya. Even if nobody can distinguish at a first look at a schedule that Ole Miss's resume is a smidge less than Tennessee's.
Well, see, I just have less faith in the playoff committee than I guess you do. I understand that's the ideal standard we want to hold them into account to. I just believe in the narratives and path of least resistance is what they'll do. So in that scenario,
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah. So in that scenario, it'd be, well, Indiana, you played nobody. You lost to the only team that you played that was halfway decent. You're out. That's what I think.
So you're telling me that if the committee deems an SEC team to be in a certain position, which again, the best example and the most crucial would be spots 10, 11, 12, because 12 falls off obviously and misses the playoffs because of the group of 5 team, unless we won't even get into Boise State breaking the top 12, that if it's SEC team, and Big Ten, then it's easier to say Big Ten team, you're gone, it being Indiana, versus we got to split hairs between these 2 SEC teams.
Correct.
Because they have bigger brands and bigger followings.
Right. And it's a very easy case to make that Indiana. What's the easy narrative to come out of it? Indiana, look at their schedule. It's currently 100. It's just they're only 10-0 because they've played nobody. If they play anyone of halfway decent talent like Michigan, it'll be a close game, and we don't foresee them winning 3 or 4 games in the playoffs. So goodbye. If you replace the word Indiana with Missouri, I believe the same argument and same result would occur.
Yeah. And this game that they just played last weekend is going to come against a Michigan team that's most likely going to finish 6-6.
Correct.
And that was not impressive.
Right. And the reason I think Missouri is a good comparison is if they were 10-0 and they played a game like Oklahoma, where they survived very late in the game, I think they would also be on the outside looking in, even if they went 10-2. It's unfortunate for Indiana, but that's the way it crumbles. Mark, I'm going to ask you about some odd scenarios real quick before I go.
Sure.
What if BYU loses in the conference championship to Colorado? Would they be in the college football playoff? Well, should they be in, and would they be in?
Should they be in based on being one of the 12 best teams in the country? No, they are not anywhere close to the 12 best teams in the country. Will they be in? If that is an extremely close loss, then they will probably get the TCU treatment, which that was to make a top 4 technically, but TCU was the 3 seed. I think they would sneak in, because then that's a 12-1 comparison versus the 10-2 SEC teams that they would be battling.
Right. I'm not sure how much of the rankings you looked at, but you look at the Big 10 or Big 12, their next best team's at 16 in Kansas State, then 17 in Colorado, and they've got nobody else in the top 25. Yeah. So the Big 12 has no respect, as they should, because they're a terrible conference, Mark. But that's why I brought that scenario up to you. It'd be just, to me, it'd be easier to say, BYU, you've played nobody of any good. See ya. You had your chance, you blew it. Yeah,
well,
you
let's
had
see what happens to SMU, though. They beat SMU. That could be a bit of a wild card selection there, an ace that they have that they're holding.
That could be. It could be. It just depends how they perform against Miami in the conference championship game. But, Mark?
Oh, I think we lost him. DeReal, appreciate you being here. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got Anthony on the line.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I am doing just fine, Anthony. As we bring you in, we've also got Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire. So, Anthony, please ask your question, and we certainly want to honor your time, but then we're going to move on to Matt.
Okay.
Rankings.
For me, this is what scares me with this. They're going to, let's say BYU and Miami win their conferences. I know they're going to automatically get the top 4, but in my head, this is conspiracy theory. I feel that the committee, they're going to hold it against Miami and BYU if they win their conferences, that they feel these conferences are weak, and they're going to hold it against Miami and BYU and put like a Texas or a Georgia, a 10-2 Georgia who wins their conference against a Texas over a Miami who has one loss.
So hang on, Anthony. So you're telling us that if Miami and BYU lose their conference championship,
win their conference, they're going to hold it against a Miami.
Okay. No, nobody can use that much autonomy in this system. The conference championships automatically are honored, and those conference champions get
you don't think they're going to hold it again, that they won it against a weak conference, that they feel that
the rules. They're going to abide by the rules.
How about you, Matt? I know there's rules, but there's political things of.
Well, okay. What's happening here is there's so much trauma and accumulated scar tissue from 2014 going on right here. It's that TCU, Baylor, Ohio State thing. But the thing is, in 2014, there were no rules. And that was the problem. There were no specific laid down, this is exactly who gets in. This is exactly what the hierarchy of priorities is. They've made the rule, top 4 seeds, highest ranked conference champions. So they put that in place. That's a clear, specific guideline that did not exist in 2014. So if you are one of the top 4 conference champions, you're getting a top 4 seed. So that there's no ability for the committee to override that. That is in place.
Okay. Oh, but you see where my conspiracy laden mind is coming from, Matt, where I don't trust the committee to make the right choices. Even with the rules in place.
But what, okay, flesh out what you think's going to happen. Like Miami or BYU is going to they're going to get top 4 seeds.
No, I understand that. But what I'm saying is that they would put what I feel they're going to do is have a 2-loss Georgia team above a Miami who has 1 loss, and maybe a 1-loss Texas, a 2-loss Texas above a conference champion and BYU who has 1 loss.
They can't.
Anthony, we understand your skepticism, Anthony, but this has been vetted out, and the rules have been well established and communicated to the public and everyone. Everyone knows what the rules are.
I have a question. When it comes to the rankings, actually, do the Matt and Mark, do the networks actually have voices in based on who they want because of the ratings they're going to get in the playoff in the top 4?
All right. Well, see, that's just it. Top 4 is going to resolve itself. It's the 5 through 12. It's the at-larges where, the influence and, who has the backroom clout. Like, that's where, I think the big worry, if you want to go with a conspiracy theory, all right, this is it. It's the SEC is going to get, 5 of its 2-loss teams. Let's say there is that 6-way 10-2 SEC logjam. The conspiracy theory that has, I think, some validity is that the SEC is going to get 5 of those 2-loss teams in, and Indiana's going to lose once and get muscled out at 11-1 because it doesn't have the brand name. That's the conspiracy theory that you could work with. But so just to be clear, the conspiracy or any kind of political television revenue motivated things such as Florida State being elbowed out last year despite going 13-0 because of the injury to Jordan Travis, that kind of stuff, it's not going to apply to the top 4 because you have a locked-in rule. It's going to happen for the at-larges lower in the bracket. And if you wanted to just go with not so much a conspiracy theory, but like let's say just like a skeptical theory, what BYU and Miami, I mean, hey, if they're getting in as top 4 seeds, like it's an amazing season, it's an amazing accomplishment for them. The kind of the not necessarily a conspiracy theory, but like the committee wants to punish them. It would be the committee gives BYU and Miami the hardest possible 6 seed for the 3 and the hardest possible 5 seed for the 4. That would be kind of the thing that you could ride with. But really, it's not going to be rigged in the top 4. It's going to be rigged in the 5 through 12 and lower in the bracket.
Yeah, and this is another a scenario that Roe didn't bring up. Let's say hypothetically, I don't think it happens. Let's say hypothetically, Miami and the ACC championship game ends in a tie, which I don't think happens. What happens then? Hypothetically, if that happens, like if the game goes through and it finishes in a tie, who gets that spot?
There's overtime.
Anthony.
No. I'm saying, is there? I thought there's sudden death overtime now in college football where it's not continuous anymore.
You're a great caller and viewer of the show, but I haven't heard from you in a long time, and so let's bring you back up to date. See, you shouldn't have taken time off of the Voice of College Football here. So we got to catch you back up to speed.
It's funny. I've been spending time with my niece. That's what it is.
Well, that's time well spent. So I don't want to take you away from your niece. But ever since 1997, we have had no ties in college football. So it's been quite some time. 1997, they did away with ties. We have overtime. They will play forever until there is a
so it's not like sudden death with the NFL where
yes. Let's not waste any more time talking about tie.
Thank you so much.
There will be a winner of every game.
Okay, thank you so much.
Anything else, Anthony?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
All right, have a good night.
It's the Rip Van Winkle hour here at the Voice of College Football.
Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. Of course, we've got Matt Zemek right here from Trojans Wire. So this is going to be a whole lot of fun because we get Matt and myself both breaking down the rankings, and we'll take your calls. Matt and I are going to talk some USC a little bit later. Typically, Tuesday night is our time to talk USC football with all of you, but we wanted to get to these rankings first, but we'll focus on the Trojans. It's, once we get to that part of the rankings, Matt, when we get down to like 55, I guess.
Yeah. I was just about to say, we're not going to talk too much USC. We're going to talk about what you want, and that's the playoff.
Absolutely. Let's take our next call. We got our buddy Will chiming in from the Notre Dame perspective. Will, how's it going? Hello, Will. You with us?
Sorry, I was muted. Matt, I
good.
love your story on the Trojans Wire about Jerry Faust and John Robinson. May God rest their souls, man.
Incredible, really. Not just that they both die on the same day, but both at age 89. That is eerie. Eerie.
Will, thank you so much for bringing that up. So if you're not aware, folks, Jerry Faust, former Notre Dame, Akron University, but of course hailed mostly at Notre Dame 1981 through 85, pre-Lou Holtz, and of course ascended from high school football right to Notre Dame, passed away today at the age of 89. And John Robinson, storied USC head coach as well, multiple Rose Bowl championships, national championship at USC, passes away on the same day, having also logged 89 years on this planet. So rest in peace to both Jerry Faust and to John Robinson. I'll have to check that out as well. So Will, thanks for including us, and everybody check out Trojans Wire with Matt on a daily basis, but on this momentous day, unfortunately, with the passing of Jerry Faust and John Robinson. Okay, Will, what do you have for us?
Well, yeah, J-Rob was also part of that crazy 78 game where it looked like McDonald fumbled it, but they called in an incompletion, and then they kicked the field goal to beat Joe Montana in his last game against the Trojans. But anyways, back to we can talk about the playoff. Irish going to Rocky Top would be fun. A little rematch of the home and homes, 04-05 home and home, and then 90-91. Of course, the 91 game was famous because that's partly what got the D coordinator of the Irish fired at that point. Darnell, I think his name was. He got fired over that game. So, and then 1990, of course, that the Irish won in Rocky Top. And then 04 was the Mike Goolsby fumble return for a touchdown as the Irish won again in Knoxville. And then 05 was, of course, Charlie Weiss's first year, and that offense tore apart the Vols. So I would try to make my way down to Knoxville. I would be kind of afraid of Tennessee fans. Like, if their fans are as aggressive as they are on Twitter, that might be kind of scary to go there as an opposing fan. But
okay, Will, so you're talking about a road trip to Knoxville, but that means that Tennessee has to go between the hedges and beat Georgia.
They have to win that game. But I always just think about the game. Like, even though I know they have to beat Georgia, I always think about the game. Like I feel like it would be similar to the Ohio State Notre Dame game from last season, like very defensive battle. But yeah.
What do you think of these rankings, Will?
I still have Penn State at 4. Like that, just how pathetic their offense was. I know Ohio State has a great defense, but the fact that they could not score a touchdown and they're at home and you rank 4th.
Where should they be ranked?
Maybe. I mean, I know BYU.
So you're going to pick on Penn State and not Texas?
I mean, Texas at least has. Texas at least has the impressive.
At least has what?
I mean, Texas at least
Texas's best win?
Texas' best win.
Yeah, I mean, that win at Michigan certainly doesn't look nearly as good.
I know
now
it doesn't look that good,
time.
but if you compare them, gosh darn, my internet's being wonky.
So Texas lost.
But there was something that Texas did. I can't freaking remember it, but there's something that Texas did that made them.
They won at Vanderbilt.
Not the Vanderbilt win. Gosh darn it!
By a field goal.
Slow? My Wi-Fi box is right next to the freaking monitor.
So Will, if we are comparing, if we want to start in the loss column, even the committee is telling us, and especially now that Georgia got stomped by Ole Miss, that Penn State is a much better loss than Texas.
Mm-hmm.
It's a closer loss, and it's to a supposedly, based on the rankings, a better team. So if we start there, Penn State's got a better loss than Texas.
It's just like when you compare some of Indiana's head-to-head, the Indiana head-to-head over Illinois, like if comparing those two.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing for everyone to remember, and that is, and this is my longstanding principle in college football rankings, that if you're comparing a 1-loss team to a 2-loss team, okay, they both have some dirt, right? They haven't done everything they can. But when you're comparing a 1-loss team to an unbeaten team, and look, we get into this all the time, every year, right? Who would win on a neutral field? That's not the basis for rankings. It's what you have achieved.
Yep.
Or at least that's how it's supposed to be done. That's Mark Rogers' top 25 that makes sense. It's what you've done. It's not who's going to win on a neutral field. If you put it, who's going to win on a neutral field, I'm not picking Indiana or BYU over Texas, over Ohio State, but they've done more because they haven't lost. When you haven't lost, you've done everything you can. When you've lost once, you haven't done everything you can. So I'm not saying Indiana is better than Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, but if we're ranking teams properly, Oregon, BYU, and Indiana, Oregon, Indiana, BYU should be the top 3.
And to be a little bit more philosophical about it, if you have yet to lose a game, it's not been proven yet that you can lose a game. Philosophically, we don't know if you can lose a game. You might be the best team in the country until you lose a game. And the other, so we could go back and forth with Penn State and Indiana, because I was making the point a few minutes ago. I was sticking up for Penn State a bit, saying, in a sense, if you're ranking and evaluating, is a better term, performance on the field, you could say that Penn State's loss against Ohio State is a better performance, more valuable performance than Indiana, any of their wins. You could have that perspective. But the other thing that Indiana has done that's impressive is that they have won every game up until this Michigan game was the first time that they had been challenged. So if you would have told me back in August, Indiana's going to be 10-0, boy, I would have thought they have got a string of 28-27 wins and miracle finishes and everything. No, they have had game control. And even the Michigan game, they had game control throughout. So that's been impressive by Indiana.
What do you guys think about Tennessee over Texas, that possibility? Because Tennessee has the better win.
Well, Tennessee does have the win than Texas, but of course, Tennessee has to go between the hedges. Then and that's the thing. We still have a lot of big games to play, and we shouldn't get our heads into a space where we're thinking, well, this is how it's going to be, and this is what's going to happen. That Notre Dame Army game is huge.
I'm trusting Al Golden to stop the option. I'm trusting in Al Golden.
Okay. I think Notre Dame wins that game, but just in terms of the implications, right? I'm not sure that Notre Dame, if it loses a second time, even if it beats USC a week later, if Notre Dame's 10-2, is Notre Dame going to be able to survive a bunch of SEC teams at 10-2, especially with that Northern Illinois albatross around its neck? I wouldn't be too confident. I think Notre Dame has to finish this thing out at 11-1. And the other thing is, if Army is unbeaten, that invites the possibility, a very distinct possibility, that Army and Boise State could give the group of 5 two representatives. If there would need to be SEC chaos. You would need to see one of those SEC at-larges pick up an extra loss. But there would certainly be the chance that you could get 2 group of 5s into the mix with an unbeaten Army and a 1-loss Boise State. So that Army-Notre Dame game, that's going to have a significant domino effect, one way or the other.
What do you guys think the odds are of a 3-loss SEC team getting in?
Right now, low, but if the dominoes fall in a certain direction, it's still possible. But I think, let's just address that head on. I think I think LSU's out. I really don't see a path for LSU. I think LSU is dead and buried. Yeah, so you're loving that Brian Kelly's gone. Absolutely. But, if 3-loss Alabama, given Alabama's many quality wins, like a 9-3 Alabama, I could see that Alabama team getting in as a 12 seed at the back end of the bracket. But there will need to be some chaos throughout the other conferences. Like a Big Ten contender will need to lose twice. There will need to be an extra stumble there. I think Notre Dame, Army, how that game falls, that could influence it. So, I would not put good money on a 3-loss SEC team getting in. I think the bigger question is, as I mentioned earlier with the previous caller, if we do get 6 10-2 teams in the SEC, could 5 of them get in? You'd think that 4 would be the max, but will the committee and with ESPN still running the show muscle in a 5th team? That's the nightmare scenario, I think, for most college football fans across the country. So it's less about a 3-loss SEC team; it's more about 5 2-loss SEC teams getting in.
So Matt, you're telling us that you could, not that you're predicting it or even think it's likely, but Alabama would be the choice at 3 losses. They would be losing a 3rd game to either Oklahoma or Auburn.
Well, that certainly wouldn't look good, but I'm just saying that if you were to imagine a 3-loss SEC team, it would be Alabama because of the quality wins.
You know who I think it might be? Texas A&M. They've got 2 losses. They've got 1 conference loss. If they lose to Texas, well, they've already lost 2. I'm sorry. They've already lost 2 games. If they beat Texas and get to the SEC championship game and lose a 3rd game.
Yeah, that's a good call. That would be better than 3-loss Alabama. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a chance of 2 ACC teams? Like
no, I think that went out the window with Miami losing. I think Miami needed to be unbeaten going into the ACC championship game and then lose to a 1-loss SMU or Clemson, and Clemson lost a 2nd game. So yeah, it's ACC and Big 12 are getting 1 team. I think that's very clear at this point. Even Colorado beating 12-0 BYU. Maybe there's a debate about BYU, but I wouldn't say that's likely, given BYU's strength of schedule. So, the BYU Colorado getting 2 to the Big 12, that's more likely than the ACC getting 2. That's for sure.
And one other unfortunate point about Indiana is if Ohio State had Indiana's exact results, there is no way they're number 5 in the country.
Exactly. Yep. That's that helmet. That's that brand name thing that we went through with TCU, Baylor, Ohio State in 2014. It's pretty much exactly that. That if TCU was Oklahoma in 2014, TCU's not getting left out, but TCU was TCU, so it got left out.
What is fascinating about the SEC is it's not even that in most years we would be like, okay, if that happened, this happened, and that happened, we could have chaos. Really, if anything happens, there is going to be some kind of log jam. It's inescapable that there's going to be some log jam of some sort.
Absolutely. Yep. Like there's going to be someone left out, and it really just bring up the point that, wherever you set the marker, right? 4 teams, 8, 12. There's always
I don't know if you heard it.
College football being messy the way it is, there's virtually always going to be a debate on the margins. That's the reality.
I don't know if you heard it earlier, Matt, but I'll address this and ask you, if that stack of SEC teams are 10-2 and they're being compared to an Indiana team at 11-1, and maybe that loss to Ohio State isn't real respectable. If they go into Columbus and it's 45-14,
I would not be shocked if Indiana gets left out.
That's what people were saying, a lot of people were saying online after they saw Heather Dinich talk about it, and it just sounded like Indiana would get left out the way she was talking about it.
And let's briefly take a detour. I know we're focused on the playoff, and we should be, but let's also spare a thought for Washington State in all
this.
This.
What if they were in the Big 12?
Washington State Washington State is on track to be 11-1, and we're not talking about them at all. Nowhere near the conversation. Yeah, 8-1. They could be 11-1, and because they're in a non-conference basically, and they play on the CW. So it's no different from the Pac-12 when Wazoo had some double-digit win teams, and they would get shoved out of the New Year's Six in favor of a bigger brand name. So spare a thought for Washington State. And I might add, it would be really cool. It would be really, really cool if we had the old Rose Bowl, traditional Rose Bowl, and we could have Washington State and Indiana play in Pasadena. Man, that would be special.
I would love that.
Now, see, if Wazoo had a better loss against Boise State, they lost by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Now, looking at the bottom of this, I know you've ruled out LSU, but obviously that third loss, or the first of 3 losses, was outside the conference against USC. They are also in play. Now, I haven't done the computations yet. I'll produce a video, hopefully get to it this week, this SEC mess. They, like everybody else not named Texas and Texas A&M, have 2 losses in the conference. So does Missouri. I'm getting them not necessarily to the playoff, but I'm getting them to an SEC championship game.
They're not completely out of it. So I guess to that extent, that would be the path. But it's really hard. The problem for LSU is it has to climb over not 1 or 2 teams. It has to climb over several teams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Missouri's schedule is not favorable from a strength of schedule standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And their losses are terrible. They got completely steamrolled by Bama and Texas A&M.
Drew Pine to the rescue against the Sooners. That was funny.
Very good. Anything else, Will?
No, I mean, one more thing. I guess Tulane would need a lot of chaos, but they could get in as the group of 5. But
on the subject of Tulane, I just gotta say, like, you hire Willie Fritz, he gets a bigger job, and you nail the replacement with Sumrall. Just so impressive that a program of that stature is able to nail consecutive coaching hires. That's how you keep the ship going.
mm-hmm.
Appreciate you being here, Will.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Thank you.
So before we take our next call, and again, Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire, get on over to Trojans Wire, check out Matt's work. And again, a historic day in a sad sense today with John Robinson and Jerry Faust passing on. Let's catch this super chat coming in from Jim. Jim, thank you so much for the contribution. What if a conference has 1 less game in conference? And of course, that would be the ACC and the SEC with 8 conference games played. Does that help or hinder long term? I'll say something quickly about that, Matt, then you can take it. It's simply about resume. Therefore, if you played 8 conference games, but you played difficult non-conference games, obviously that is going to supplement your conference schedule. So it's all about what the complete resume is. Indiana, they've captured a lot of this talk. They scheduled no one outside the conference. FIU, Charlotte, I forget the other game, probably a MAC team. Awful non-conference scheduling by Indiana. I kind of think that they weren't necessarily contemplating a playoff run when they were putting together their 2024 non-conference schedule. They were just trying to get to a bowl game, what they were thinking. So Matt, what are your thoughts about the conference disparity?
Well, Jim, good question. And I think that, different schools have different scheduling philosophies for the non-conference. And if you load up on cupcakes, then having 1 less cupcake and 1 more conference game, that's a really positive difference in terms of strength of schedule. If you're a school that tries to schedule like a really tough non-con game and a medium non-con game and 1 cupcake, then you'd probably wouldn't mind playing only 8 conference games because you try to set a standard in your non-conference scheduling philosophy of playing decent teams and one really good team. So in that case, the calculus might be a little different. So part of this is the scheduling philosophy, but in terms of not necessarily having the best resume, but having the best chance to make your way through the season successfully, we're seeing this year in the SEC why the SEC has stayed at 8 games as long as it has, because with the transfer portal, and hey, I'm not the first person to say this. Others have said it before me. Dave Bartu, CFB Matrix, he made this point today on Twitter, that the transfer portal has really eroded the depth of the top programs because players want to get playing time elsewhere. The way the transfer portal has worked is that it's thinning out the depth at the higher end programs. So like Georgia has been banged up a lot this season. Kirby Smart's been talking about the lack of depth on his injured offensive line. So in this transfer portal NIL era, we're seeing more parity, right? This is a parity-rich season. This is not the Alabama-Clemson Death Star era 6-7 years ago, where 2 teams were lording themselves over the rest of the sport. This is wild parity, and it's great, but it is parity. And so if you are one of the top programs, not so much in Indiana, as Mark said, you weren't really thinking you'd be in the playoff hunt. But if you're a top program, I think just in terms of what enables you to get through 12 games reasonably healthy, being able to manage workloads for your players, 8 games instead of 9 is helpful in that regard. But if we're talking resume, it's obviously beneficial to have 9 conference games. But we could see schools, think of, how do we navigate the season? And it's going to be interesting to see how that gets handled. Will there be in the future a move to 8 games for some of these other power conferences? I mean, I doubt it, because the television money is too big and the contracts have already been signed, and I don't know how you really unwind that. Like the genie's already out of the bottle. But just in terms of evaluating what gives you the best chance of success, I think we're seeing why the SEC stayed at 8 games as long as it has.
And again, Jim, just getting to what it appears to be the crux of your question is, the committee is not going to sit there and say, no, we're penalizing an SEC team because they only played 8 conference games. No, it's a resume ranking, and a performance clause is included. The resume, and then also what the eyeball test is telling them, or they think it's telling them about these individual teams. But thank you so much for the question there, Jim. And we appreciate everyone being here at the Voice of College Football. We also have a super chat coming in from Adam. Adam, thanks for being here. Of course, LSU has no class. Behaving like that against Alabama was unacceptable, and slowly but surely my Notre Dame prediction is gaining momentum. So just to fill you in, everyone, on the first point, LSU got what they thought was a bad call against Bama. There was the Texas type display of throwing water bottles onto the field and protesting the call. And then Adam also called in sometime early in the season, I believe it was after the Texas A&M win, and made a prediction that Notre Dame would win the national championship. Any thoughts about those 2 topics, Matt?
I don't have a whole lot to say. I mean, I think that in terms of what's going to happen in the playoff, like I need to see the bracket for that. And LSU, it's just been a very frustrating year. And of course, here at USC, like we contributed to that frustrating year by giving Brian Kelly another loss in a season opening game. And I know several LSU fans I talked to on Twitter that I've conversed with regularly over the years, for like a decade, talking college football, and they didn't like Brian Kelly. They knew that he had some coaching chops and credentials, but they didn't like him. Like there was never a cultural fit there. There was not a natural disposition or inclination to welcome Brian Kelly. So the fact that he is failing, it's not It's not the same as, like, for instance, USC and Lincoln Riley. Like, everyone fell in love with Lincoln Riley at the start. He wins 11 games in year one. He could be the savior. He could be Pete Carroll 2.0. And it's really just frustration at Lincoln Riley that he hasn't gotten it done. But with LSU and Brian Kelly, it's different. It's like, we never liked you in the first place, So in that sense, Kelly has a shorter leash. If you're just going to compare the two guys, Kelly has a shorter leash than Riley does. But of course, LSU is like an 8-9 win program. USC is 4-5. So that kind of levels it out. But like, I guess the more precise point to make is, if USC and LSU are achieving at the same level, that hurts Brian Kelly more than it does Lincoln Riley. Obviously, LSU, it has nowhere near the severity of problems that Lincoln Riley does. But I'm just saying, if you were to map out a scenario in which they're both achieving at the same level, that does less for Brian Kelly than for Lincoln Riley. So, it's understandable that everyone is really just PO'd in Baton Rouge, and the anger and the negative emotions are spilling out. It's very understandable in that regard.
We've got about 150 on the line. If you watch us or currently are on one of the alternate channels, just want to keep in mind that we go post-game call-in show, so you can call us up here on the main channel Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night after the primetime games. All right, Michael chiming in here at the Voice of College Football. Michael, how you doing?
Hey, good, Mark. Matt, how you guys doing tonight?
Excellent.
Doing
How are
good.
you?
All right, I got a question for you. If it wasn't for Penn State, I think Penn State and IU should flip-flop. Would you agree or disagree?
Penn State and Indiana?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm on record as saying, if you're unbeaten, you should go to the top of the line. So, if I was doing this, I'd have Oregon 1, Indiana 2, BYU 3. And again, that doesn't mean I think Indiana and BYU would beat Ohio State, Texas, Penn State on a neutral field. Separate question. That's not how we should do rankings. It's what you have achieved. And if you have a perfect record, you have done everything you can. And if you have a loss, you have not done everything you can.
Sure.
And we need to honor the sanctity of the perfect record in college football, something that didn't happen last year with Florida State, which is why so many people were rightly so angry about that. So it would be, for me, if I'm ranking, just not predicting who wins head to head, just who should be ranked where. Oregon 1, Indiana 2, BYU 3.
Okay,
Michael, I know that you're a faithful viewer of my rankings, the top 25 that actually makes sense. Where do I have Indiana and Penn State?
2, you have IU 2, and I think Penn State was 6th, I think it was, or 5th?
4. Yeah, 2 and 4.
All right, I was sure. Now, with IU being on their bye week, do you think that might hurt them? Or do you think they'll still be number 5 next week?
Well, they're going to be undefeated next week. We know that.
True.
I mean, if Indiana moves one spot or not, it doesn't really matter too much, right? It's all about Ohio State. And a lot of people in the chat are saying this, and I agree. Don't get blown out. Don't lose big. Just be competitive in Columbus. Probably should be good to go.
All right, now,
in terms of the playoff. But
now,
do not get blown out. Do not lose by 30. That's for sure.
Mark knows how much of a diehard Purdue fan I am and stuff like that, but that's a different subject for a different
day.
Where's
Purdue ranked? Where are they on here?
Are they in like the number 138th team in the country? But anyway, get back to what I was saying, though, Mark. I got a question. What would be considered a respectable loss for IU if they did lose to Ohio State? A 10-point loss?
Yeah. I mean, if 10 points, if they lose by 10 and it's not one of those games where they get a couple late garbage touchdowns. It's a 24, 27 point game, but Indiana gets a couple late garbage touchdowns. That's fine. And by the way, just that brings to mind 1994 when that exact thing happened.
There you go.
Penn State was demolishing Indiana. Hoosiers get some cosmetic touchdowns late, and that influenced the final vote, Nebraska being number 1, Penn State number 2. So Indiana garbage touchdowns in November.
We're more sophisticated than that now, man.
Championship before.
Now, let me ask you this. It was pretty much, Mark would remember this, the COVID year. IU was, pretty much it was like a 42-7 most of the game for Ohio State, and Penix had a fourth quarter fury, but they fell short 42-35. If I'm not mistaken, did that hurt Ohio State somewhat that year?
Well, they went to the national championship game. In terms of the rankings, I don't remember what the rankings did the next week. They were safely, and that was such a strange year, obviously, for a zillion reasons, but that Ohio State and teams in the Big Ten and the Pac-12 played so few games compared to everyone else. Basically, the committee just knew that Ohio State was at a certain level, and they were like 4-0, and they just ranked them. You know, it's such a difficult ranking process that year. I don't remember how that game impacted Ohio State exactly, because Indiana by that time had gained some respect, being undefeated.
Now I think there's like 6 teams in the SEC's 2-loss teams right now.
Is it 6, 7, whatever? I'll count while you're asking your question.
Question is, Georgia loses, Bama loses, Ole Miss loses. Is that going to start this weekend? Going to start eliminating some of those teams that they lose this weekend? Is being 3-loss teams?
You're counting on a lot of upsets there.
I wouldn't say they get eliminated, but obviously they go to the back of the line. Let's just put it that way. And it definitely smooths the path for 11-1 Indiana, assuming Indiana does lose to Ohio State.
Yep.
So like that, it would matter. Let's put it this way: it would matter. It might not matter for every team, but it would certainly matter for some teams. That's for sure.
All right, last question before I let you go, because I know you got to get going, Matt. Thanks for taking my time. IU shucks the world and smokes Ohio State. Could you see them leapfrogging, going all the way to number 1?
If Indiana beats Ohio State, Indiana would you'd have unbeaten Indiana and unbeaten Oregon in the Big Ten title game, 1 versus 2.
Yeah, but I mean, like with what IU's been doing this year, was really, except for last week when it was a tight game and stuff like that. I mean, they say they beat Ohio State by like 30 points. In the next poll, do you think that might be enough to leapfrog them over Oregon? If Oregon, I can't remember who Oregon got this week.
Well, it doesn't really matter because you'd have Indiana versus Oregon in the Big Ten title game. So whether Indiana's 1 and Oregon's 2, or Oregon's 1 and Indiana's 2, you're having the top 2 teams in the Big Ten title game.
True. Last thing. Oregon and IU plays. IU beats Oregon and stuff like that. IU could be the number 1, obviously, unless BYU smokes Colorado.
If Indiana goes 13-0 and beats Ohio State and Oregon on the way, yes. Now, not a soul on this planet's going to predict that, but if it happens, yes, of course. Sure. Like you can't arrive at any other conclusion.
True, and imagine what Lucas Oil Stadium would be like if it was IU and Oregon for the Big Ten championship. That would be a pro IU crowd.
Well, Lucas Oil with Indiana there would just be an absolutely incredible story and scene.
Yep. All right. Guys, thanks for taking my time, man. I appreciate it. Have a great show.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
See ya.
All right. Let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. And again, I want to thank Matt for joining us. I knew it'd be a great discussion having Matt here to talk rankings with us. If you're on the USC channel, we're not broadcasting there right now because USC's out of the playoffs. We're just simulcasting to playoff contenders, but
we can just say it because USC sucks.
Oh my goodness. I took ridicule for picking them to go 8-4 this year, but and I was quite optimistic as it turned out. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got our buddy Matthew Miller here, who does the Texas show on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern time over on the Texas channel. The SEC shows on Tuesday at
7 now.
All right, excellent. Hey, Matthew.
Okay. Hey, what's up, guys? So I have a little bit of pushback with the Indiana over Texas thing, and it's because of this. So, Mark, you would say last year you didn't rank Liberty because of their strength of schedule, correct?
Correct.
Indiana's strength of schedule is closer to Liberty's right now than it is that of Texas. They are 100th at strength of schedule.
Okay. Of course, you're taking the Texas side on this. We get it.
By the way, no, but that's the thing. I'm being logical about this.
Look
BYU should
Texas has done this year.
BYU should be ranked ahead of us. I completely
Texas
agree
got
with that.
smoked by a Georgia team that has looked vulnerable the entire season and then got just crashed and burned against Ole Miss. Like, if we look at Georgia through objective perspective, are they a top 15 team in the country? Something in that range? They're not Georgia 2021, 22. Like, I think we're a bit skewed on Georgia, and Texas got manhandled at home against Georgia. They beat Vandy by a field goal in a very competitive game. Their best win, Texas's best win, is Michigan.
No, I would say I think Vanderbilt's better than Michigan.
Vanderbilt's the best win. A 3-point win against Vanderbilt.
But again, logically speaking, why didn't you have Liberty ranked higher last year then?
Because they played
Neither has Indiana.
Power 5 games.
Okay, Indiana's best win is 5-4 Nebraska.
This is the debate we're having, right? That if you go unbeaten against a weak schedule in a power conference, should that be regarded differently compared to a group of 5 teams schedule? That is essentially the debate that we're having. And I think, I think I can see it from both sides. I would say that, if you are playing power conference opposition, if you're playing, look, no one's saying Michigan State's good. Okay. No one's saying that Illinois, Nebraska, Maryland are good, but you are playing those teams every week as opposed to playing the teams that Liberty played most weeks. You are asked to go up against a caliber of athlete week in, week out, which is better, and it takes more from your team. I think there should be some benefit of the doubt given to the power conference team for that reason. You're not playing cupcakes every week. You're playing mediocre Big Ten teams every week. Again, not a huge gulf. We're not talking about a dramatic difference, but there should be some lean. There should be some credit given for doing what you do in a power conference. The question is how much, right? How much weight of emphasis?
Okay, before I address that, somebody's jumping in the chat as me. Do not do that again. If I find out, that's happened in the past. So do not make stupid comments in my name, whoever has access to it. All right. So the comment I'll make back to that, Matthew, is that we're not talking about a daunting Texas schedule. If Texas had a better loss against Georgia, meaning they were competitive, or Georgia was Georgia that we expected, or Texas had a really good win, like their wins, what's their best win? Vanderbilt, and their second best win is?
I would honestly at this point say Louisiana Monroe because they only have one loss, I believe, 1 or 2.
Okay.
No, I'm not saying Texas has a hard schedule, but compared to Indiana, it is harder. They have 55th. Indiana's 100th. BYU, by the way, I completely agree. BYU should be ranked ahead of Texas. Better strength of schedule, better strength of record, and undefeated. Absolutely, they should be ranked ahead of Texas. I do not understand that.
And let me make it clear that while I disagree with you, I don't think your argument's ridiculous. I think it's a legitimate argument. So it's not like you're ridiculous, get out of here. Not at all. I think it's a legitimate argument.
Okay, and this is the craziest thing. So, Matt, you said, and I didn't know this till today, Matt Moscona, who's a friend of the program, he does a good job, laid out this scenario about LSU can still make the SEC championship game, and it's not crazy. If Arkansas or Texas loses before that Texas plays A&M, or if they lose to A&M, and Georgia beats Tennessee this weekend, LSU gets in on tiebreakers. Because it caused a 7-team tie, and they would win that.
Oh, wow.
That's not crazy. That's probably going to happen.
That is wild.
One more time. LSU sweeps.
Correct. And then either, I believe, Missouri has to lose, Arkansas either has to beat Texas or Missouri. They don't have to beat both. They have to beat one of the two. And then Georgia has to beat Tennessee. That is it.
Yeah, Arkansas or Missouri, like that.
That's probably going to happen.
And then the committee is comparing resumes from SEC 10-2 teams, and just like their eyes are crossing.
Yeah, and that's why
Okay.
my argument, like, we need to go to, and you've talked about this, and I completely agree. We need a commissioner to balance out these schedules, one, and then either to get all these conferences to 9 or even 10 conference games so this does not happen. Because the reason this is happening is because the SEC has 8 conference games. If they played more, it's less likely to happen.
Absolutely. I posted a video before last week's games, and I thought, with all these teams, oh, they're going to have tons of games against each other. And I went through the schedule and I listed there were 4 games left against all those teams. And I'm like, they're not even playing each other.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And you know what? Just before Matt, you get in, I just want to say this is part of the parity that we're seeing in college football this year. Because the big conferences, we're thinking, oh, more big matchups, more showcases. But with the 18-team, 16-team super conference, mega conference, what it actually means is there's more chances to hide from the elite opponents in your conference, that you can't play all the big dogs. And that has been a main driver of parity. It hasn't created less, it's created more. We have to be clear about that.
Yeah, and that's a question too. I know the Cover 3 guys, I listen to them quite a bit, and they were talking about, is it truly Georgia is a lot worse than they have been, or are they playing a much harder schedule? Because look, their schedule's really damn hard this year, especially compared to last year. I think it's a combination of both. Another thing too, which is crazy, and this was brought up today too, another podcast I listened to, Clemson could go 10-2 and win the ACC. Georgia could go 10-2 in the SEC, and Clemson, because they win the ACC, would get in over Georgia when Georgia absolutely dog walked them the first week. I hate automatic qualifiers.
I would say though that 10-2 Georgia's getting in. If Georgia wins out, I don't see Georgia getting left out.
Most likely, but even though that they have to fight their way in, when Clemson just, they obviously fought their way in, but they get that automatic qualifier. I'm just against automatic qualifiers at this point. Like with the
conferences, that's the reason we have conferences. And Clemson would also be 11-2.
Okay, 11-2. But in the ACC compared to the SEC, I think that's a pretty big difference, especially schedule-wise, with the Georgia schedule and then the Clemson schedule.
I don't disagree.
Yeah,
but you know what? This is why we have 12 teams, and we can debate the merits of 12 teams on a lot of different levels. But the one way in which 12 teams makes sense is that you honor conference championships, but there's room for 8 other teams, or actually, group of 5. That group of 5 champion is winning its own conference. So really, you have space for 7 non-champions of conferences to get into the field. So, in many ways that actually is an item in favor of your point, Matt, that you're allowing teams to not win a conference. If you get the short straw in the schedule lottery, as Georgia has, as other teams have, you still get in. So that's a positive thing for the 12-team format.
Would you guys be in favor of what? Would you rather have a 9-team for every conference or 10-team conference schedule?
9. I'm at 9. I think 10. You're real. Because what that does is you're basically saying only 2 non-conference games, and that means that the lower income conferences and schools they're going to be missing paychecks, and you're going to basically shove them out of business. And I don't think people want that.
Yeah. I think it'll greatly reduce the incentive to go out and schedule difficult non-conference games as well.
Yeah, that would probably happen. So this will be my last question. Usually I can give you 1 to 2 teams and you take them versus the field. How many teams would I have to give you this year before you take them over the field?
I'm not taking anyone versus the field. I don't think Oregon's a clear-cut number 1. And for anyone who's might think this, no, it's not because I'm a USC blogger, because Oregon was very fortunate to beat Ohio State. And that's taking nothing away from Oregon. It's just that was a very tenuous 50-50 game. Oregon got a 50-50 call with that offensive pass interference against Ohio State. It was at home in Eugene. Like, Oregon has not separated itself. I made that comment earlier. This is not the Alabama-Clemson 2015 through 2018 era in which there were 2 teams on the mountaintop, and then there was everybody else. We do not have that. It is wild parity. No one has clearly separated itself from the rest of the field. That's what we're looking at.
I'll take 4 teams very confidently. I'll take Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and Bama.
Those would be my exact 4 as well. I think, and then if I had to throw a 5th one in there, it'd be Ole Miss after what I saw, because I think their defensive line's just that damn good.
True.
I think their defensive line's very good. But yeah, I think that's what it is. It's either 4 or 5 teams. I don't really see anyone else, honestly.
So you don't think realistically anybody outside of those 5 teams can win the national championship?
Man, I want to say Georgia, but every time I see Carson Beck, no, absolutely not. He turns the ball over way, way, way too much. Like if Texas didn't just completely, down their leg, we would have been in that game, because he just completely played terrible in that game. So I don't know who else I would add to that. I'm trying to think. Penn State, I don't trust. Andy Koldenitke really let me down in that game versus Ohio State. That was bad play calling that whole game. Man, no, there really isn't anyone. Do you think there's anyone else?
No, I have no confidence in anyone else.
I'm just going to go with the fact that because there's so much parity, it just takes one part of the bracket to blow wide open to change the calculus. And, like we know and love the NCAA tournament, we're going to see a 12 over a 5. See it all the time in hoops, right? So, I'm just the parity is so overwhelming for me that I'm entering this however the bracket shakes out, or at least maybe it shakes out in a way that I see a hierarchy, but I'm inclined to think that parity is going to be the theme of this bracket.
I do think it's going to be heavily matchup dependent this year compared to others. I think there's other years where it's not. And I think this year definitely is. And there's a team that's not going to make it. I'm going to get hate for this. I'll say it, and then I'll let you guys go. I'm really happy South Carolina has 3 losses, because that defense, no way in hell I want to play them. Do not want to play them. Thank you for screwing them, SEC versus LSU. Thank you. Don't play them.
Shane Beamer also coached horrendously at the end of that LSU game.
Yeah, he did.
True. Yeah. It was a great game. It was a fun game to watch. But for South Carolina fans, they must be just going crazy over that game. But that's a great call, because few people consider South Carolina, but they've played every game airtight outside of Ole Miss.
Yeah. But thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
See ya.
Again, folks, the Texas show with Matthew and also the SEC show, those are Mondays and Tuesday nights. We've got Minnesota Dave dropping by.
Hey, how's it going?
We're doing just fine. How are you, Minnesota Dave?
I'm doing better now. I have a little bit of a health issue, but I can't really talk about it.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. But what I was going to say was, let's go all the way to the bottom here. We got the Army and Tulane basically right next to each other. And I'm looking at this and thinking, if Tulane wins out, like if they they have Navy coming up, and then they play on Thanksgiving against Memphis, which is going to be a tough game for them too. If they win those games, and if Army, let's say, loses to Notre Dame but wins their game against UTEP or one of the Texas, the smaller school. I keep on forgetting who they are. It's the Texas not Texas El Paso,
Texas
but
San Antonio.
Yeah, San Antonio. Yeah, whatever. And I'm sorry, Texas San Antonio fans. I don't know you exist.
We've got a couple hundred in here right now. So be careful, Dave.
I'll be careful. But because the Army Navy game, unfortunately, is being played on the 14th. And I don't know if they're going to count it or not. And we kind of talked about it last time. I don't think they will, because they're already going to have their college football playoffs already made out for it, because it's right after the championship games. I think that you could see an Army or a Tulane jump over Boise State. Even if Boise State goes undefeated the rest of the way, I just think.
I don't think there's enough meat on the bone for 2-loss Tulane to jump over 12-1 Boise State if we get to that.
Not enough meat on the bone.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
needed to beat Kansas State, quite frankly.
Well, what if Army ends up shocking everybody and beats Notre Dame?
Well, unbeaten Army is in front of Boise State, right?
Yeah, they should be.
Yeah. But obviously, the committee's waiting to see what happens against Notre Dame. That's why Army's not ranked very highly, but that'll change if Army beats Notre Dame. Tulane's just in an unfortunate spot. Tulane would need Boise State and Army to lose. That's what Tulane needs.
Sorry about that.
Because Tulane, 2-loss Tulane versus 2-loss Boise State, very different story. But if Boise State doesn't lose a second game, I don't see it happening. Remember, Boise State drilled Washington State. Washington State's a good 8-1 team. That's a top 20 win right now. Tulane does not have enough heft to overcome that. But if Boise State loses a second time, well, that completely changes things. So that's what you need to be rooting for if you're a Tulane backer.
Okay, and basically, yeah, that's basically it for me. I just wanted to talk about the bottom teams because everyone's going to talk about the top.
Well, I just have to say, you're Minnesota Dave and you're talking about Tulane. So you probably know that Bernie Bierman is an icon at both Tulane and Minnesota.
Yep.
There you go. You're on top of it.
All right. I will talk to you guys later.
Thanks for calling, Dave.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Appreciate Minnesota Dave. And we will keep up the rankings discussion. We've got our buddy Adam stopping by. Of course, you can catch Adam on the Rutgers channel, folks. Adam, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Mark. How are you? Thanks for having me on. How you doing, Matt?
Hey, you rode the boat against Minnesota. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Finally, a win after 4 straight losses. So I'll be quick. These rankings make me wonder, Mark, who is deciding this? Is it a bunch of academics? Is it a bunch of mid-level bureaucrats? And why aren't you on the committee? Because this is ridiculous. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to explain.
Adam, you know that Mark is anti-establishment. He's not going to be allowed into the club.
Well, I'll tell you, Mark, you should be, because this is. I'll tell you what. There is no justification whatsoever for BYU to be above Alabama, Ole Miss. And why is Penn State fourth? Penn State, same old Penn State in Unhappy Valley. You have no offense and a defense that's going to get worn down because the offense just can't score. You saw that against Ohio State. They have no business being number 4. And quite frankly, and I know people are going to disagree, I think Oregon's finished. They should not be at number 1. They were struggling in the first half against Michigan State. They beat Ohio State by 1 second, and they should have lost that game. Okay? And you know what? I haven't seen them beat any team with a winning record on the road.
Okay, Adam, what's your top 5?
I wrote them down. You want me to give you the 12 or the 5, depending on your tolerance level. Number 1, Ohio State. Number 2, Texas. Number 3, Oregon. Number 4, Ole Miss. Number 5, Alabama. Number 6, Tennessee. Number 7, Miami. Number 8, Indiana. Number 9, Penn State. Number 10, Notre Dame. Number 11, South Carolina. Number 12, Georgia. And the reason I put South Carolina in is because right now they're one of the 12 best teams. I don't care if they have 3 losses. BYU, if you play,
yeah, that's the point. You do not care how many losses teams have. That's
because I care about who the best teams are. And when you focus solely on wins and losses without taking into account schedule disparity and a lot of other nuance, you get BYU ranked 6 and Penn State 4. It's ridiculous. I'm appalled. Mark, what do you have to say about this? I'm serious. I'm very upsetting. My blood pressure is going up because of this.
Before Mark starts in, I'm just going to say, Adam, you are ranking teams according to what would the Vegas line be and who would be favored on a neutral field, right? Like that's how you're ranking these teams.
Well, that might be the implication. I'm ranking them based upon my own subjective look at these teams. And there's no possible way after the Utah game you could say BYU should be above Alabama. I mean, I don't understand what's going on here. This is not professional. And you know what? If we're going to have a credible college football playoff, then we should be looking at who the best teams are. BYU would not be undefeated if they were in the SEC. Okay? And I'm sorry, when you look at the records, you get rankings like this. Indiana's too high, BYU's too high, Penn State's too high. I don't know what to say, guys. I mean, unless you have the courage, and I'm not talking about you guys, unless people have the courage to say, look, these are what the rankings are based on what we think are the best teams, then you're just playing the same games you did in the 14 playoff, and I don't see what the difference is by making it a 12-team playoff. I'm done with my rant. Thank you for listening to me.
So, Adam, I'm going to expect you to answer this honestly. Do you arrive at the beginning of the college football season with a predisposition of how good these teams are?
Yes.
Okay. Then once we start to play these games, understand that recent history, meaning the last 15 years or so, has shown us that the SEC is the superior conference. And it's not even debatable or really that close, okay? But did we have enough non-conference games in this particular season, wiping away everything we know about the past, to determine that the SEC was clearly the best conference?
No.
Because obviously once they start playing each other, we can build all sorts of narratives. We can skew it in any one way direction we want to concerning a conference, because the math is obviously when you add up the entire conference, every conference goes 500 because everybody wins the game, everybody loses the game. So in terms of the balance and the power distribution within the conference, that can be argued.
So you make a great point, and I think what you're referring to is recency bias. And how I would respond to that is to say that what I'm using more than that is primacy bias, namely the teams that are playing the best right now and that would be in contention for the national championship. And the teams that are playing the best right now are not BYU. South Carolina is. They're a very dangerous team. So they have 3 losses. If anything, why aren't we rewarding the best teams and saying, look, you may have lost 3 games earlier this season, and we don't know if BYU would have gone undefeated in the SEC. I'll grant that. But who's the better team after you saw BYU play and South Carolina play? So I'm using a bias, but I'm using it based on what's happening now and not historically, if that makes sense.
So it also sounds like you were not evaluating the complete resume 1 through 12 data points equally. You are trying to build momentum, much like the NCAA selection committee does in basketball, to say, okay, what was the last 10 games? How did that look? Are we selecting the hottest teams, not the teams that perform the best over the course of the entire season? And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just clarifying.
Yeah. So by way of analogy, if a student of mine does very poorly in the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks of a semester, but then aces the last 2 exams, I'm going to give the student an A, and I'm not going to drag the student down to a B because of earlier poor performance, because the goal should be who is the best team at this moment. And clearly to me, if you look at how BYU played and look at how Indiana played against a 4-5 or 5-5 Michigan team, there's no way you can have Indiana at 5. There's no way you could have BYU at 6. And after Alabama destroys LSU and Milroe runs for 190 yards and 4 touchdowns and Ole Miss dominates Georgia in the trenches, you're going to put them behind BYU, Indiana, and Penn State, and even Notre Dame. I don't see the logic. We need to have some committee members who have some guts and some real world experience and some old fashioned common sense. They don't have it. These rankings are invalid in my book. And I don't want to waste any more time because I don't want to get worked up again. I really don't.
So just to clarify, once again, Adam, you want the best teams in December playing football. You don't want the best teams over the course of 2024. Because those can be two different
Correct
things, obviously. And then just to challenge your Penn State ranking, understand that Penn State played a close game against Ohio State, your number one team in the country. Regardless of how their offense looked, that was a close game. And you're giving Ohio State the nod as the best team in the country.
Penn State went ahead 10-0. And how many points did Penn State score after that? It was close on the scoreboard. It was not close on the field.
Well, that's a good point. You're right. Ohio State gifted Penn State in a sense and allowed them to hang in the game based on turnovers.
And Mark, all I'm going to say is you should be in a position of leadership to make these decisions. And so should you, Matt. These bureaucrats that we have right now, they're a disgrace. I'm not going to take any more time. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Adam,
yeah,
we both disagree with your rankings.
That's okay. Disagreement is good as long as it has a factual basis to it.
Okay.
These do not.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Adam and I always have great discussions, so I always appreciate Adam's out of the box.
Same here.
Look at things.
Appreciate you having me here, guys.
Thanks, Adam. Great stuff out of Adam, as always. And we will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got our buddy, Dr. Buckeye, David Greenshield.
Gentlemen, I find the conversation very interesting this evening. I did want to chime in with my opinion on the scheduling, first of all, because I haven't gotten a chance to voice my opinion on that. I am a person that's largely been in favor of 9 conference games. I basically see 3 non-conferences games as the way to go. Just bottom line, since there is no preseason in college football, and basically college football is morphing into the NFL anyway, I think what you should basically have is 2 warm-up games, and then ideally you would play a solid top 10 to 15, at least top 20 team in your non-conference. That would be, to me, the ideal. You maybe have a non-Power 5 as one of those 2 cupcakes, maybe a weaker Power 5 team, and then you have hopefully your big boy top 15, top 20 team as your third opponent in your non-conference. And then we move along to 9 conference games and we go from there. What do you think, gentlemen? Your thoughts?
I think that's about right. I mean, I think you're setting the markers in the appropriate places with the requisite degree of balance. I think that's a solid foundation.
I have a formula where there would be 3 non-conference games, and these games would be in a formula similar to the NFL in that it's a formula dissimilar to the NFL, that we are not propping up the worst teams to play the easiest schedules and suppressing the best teams to play the toughest schedules to achieve a parity standpoint. No, we are going for fairness in the scheduling. So I would allow these schools to go out and schedule 1 cupcake so we could continue to fund the lower conferences and give them a payday. Then the other 2 non-conference games would be scheduled by my selection committee, and they would be achieving a 500 composite record, meaning they would schedule everyone in such a way as to play a 500 composite record from the previous season with some nuance. That's why it wouldn't be spit out by a computer, but a committee that would also be able to project what teams are in the decline, which teams are in the ascension from the previous season, to give some nuance, but to achieve a 500 composite schedule for every team out of conference.
Now, Mark, you still have your application into the conference commissioners and the NCAA to be the scheduling czar, I believe. I don't know if that's been processed or moved forward as of yet, but you've got my vote, Mark. I just want you to know that.
Well, I appreciate that, David. That would be the first vote.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. I think you make a great point because, I said ideally that one of the three games would be, let's say, a top 15 to top 20 opponent. And I think, what we've talked about in the past is these schedules are made so far in advance. Like what was a top 15 to 20 opponent, let's say 3 or 4 years ago, might not be the top 15 to 20 opponent. Like, obviously, let's take a look at Florida State. Like, Florida State appearing on Notre Dame's schedule at the beginning of the year, they got to be thinking, okay, well, if we get a win over a solid 9-3 Florida State team, which was as they were ranked at the start of the season, that's going to look, fairly decent on our resume. If we give them a 9-3 football team, their loss, which is kind of where Florida State was ranked. I think they started out preseason 15, 16, somewhere in that.
They were in the top 10.
They were in the top 10. My bad. Even more so, Mark. So, I mean, that's still the tough part. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. You did say that you would do the scheduling a year out, or how far out would you? Because, you remember these games are done years out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Off season, just during the off season.
Okay.
There can be Major League Baseball complete schedules that are like 10 times the scheduling difficulty of 32 teams and series and 162 game schedules, and this is all devised during the off season. We don't need years and years to schedule these.
Yeah.
And we would have a national holiday similar to the NFL schedule release that would celebrate college football, let's say on May 1st, and we would release our schedule. No one would have you would have an idea because you'd understand the formula of the conference scheduling, of course, but you would have no idea going into May 1st what this non-conference schedule would look like, and we'd unveil the release of and college football would take center stage at least for a day or two. Unlike now when we already know, Georgia just signed with Clemson for 2037 and 2038. Okay, great.
Right.
There would be none of that. No, the schedule could be created during the off season.
Right. Yeah, we just got to get the presidents and the athletic directors and the conference commissioners all on board with this, right, Mark?
Yes, we're taking it out of your hands. We're not having Baylor not schedule a ranked team non-conference since 1996. We're not doing that.
Yeah, the one thing is like what we've talked about is some of these teams that we think are going to be good, even in May or off season, there's such a flip over of these rosters with NIL nowadays that, who you're getting, who you think is good could still be, totally flipped over on its ear.
Well, anytime you project into the future and work schedules, you can't foresee everything. Sure, there are going to be teams that are going to have more difficult schedules and easier schedules, but at least I guarantee it would be much closer to the median.
Right.
Let me step in with one note. I've banged this drum in the past, and it's a good time to bang this drum now. This is why college football needs to think about one flex game every year at the end of the season. And you look at the first half of the season. It's like week 7, week 8. Then the conference commissioners will announce the flex game. So everyone will play a game on like November 16th or 23rd, whatever. So like that date is set aside as an open date. In mid-October, the conference commissioners announce the flex games. Higher teams playing higher teams. Middle, lower. College football should play one flex game every season to address this precise point.
I love that. Let's make it 2.
Okay.
Let's do the mid-season or 2/3 of a season flex game. And then let's also take from the lesson that we learned during the COVID year, where it was set up in the Big Ten in particular. Now they weren't able to execute it very well.
Right.
But the final weekend of the season, so you play, let's say you've got a 9-game conference schedule. You only schedule 8 games. And for the final week of the season, you match up based on seedings to make a important set of games, and you lay it all out where you see the teams and you play 1 versus 2, 3 versus 4, et cetera, on down the line throughout the entire conference schedule. And then that will set up your championship weekend.
Well, can I say so? You're saying, just to be clear, Mark, you're saying the 12th game is kind of up in the air?
Absolutely.
Mark, we're Ohio State fans here. I mean, Mark.
Yeah, I
Mark.
know. I'm treading on sacred ground.
Very sacred ground here, Mark. I have one day that's like Christmas for me, and you know what it is.
Well,
you know.
How did Christmas wind up the last 3 years?
Mark, please. Come on now. Don't talk about a nefarious program that's up to no good and cheats, okay? I will not hear this from the scumbags. By the way, great to see a demoralized Steve Dace this week. I got so much enjoyment out of that.
But I'm telling you, I've worked out the projected matchups on taking actual conference seasons, chopping off the final game, and then saying, okay, how would this set up for the final weekend? And it works out pretty well to tighten the legitimacy and the validity with these massive conferences.
Yeah.
In terms of playing a meaningful game for those top 3 to 4 to 5 teams, to give clarity to, okay, this is a championship game that's legit and decided by what just happened this final weekend.
But Mark, it's not just, and I think our rivalry's above everybody's, but I mean, these rivalries, and you're a traditionalist, Mark, it's one of the last linkages that we have to the college football that we grew up with here, Mark.
I know.
I don't want to see you throw that in the garbage can,
All right. Let me think that through. We'll maybe come up with another layer.
Give that a little bit of thought there, Mark. All right. I want to get to the playoff too, guys. Okay. Dave earlier almost stole my thunder on the Army situation. Did you guys think out the Army situation from the standpoint? Now, you guys said if Army goes undefeated and beats Notre Dame, we're believing they take Boise's spot as the 12th seed. Is that correct?
Yes. If Army runs the table, Army gets the G5.
Okay, and I think you're going to know where I'm going with this in a second. When is the final college football playoff rankings?
You're talking about Army not having played Navy yet.
That's right, because it's on December the 14th. I believe the rankings are before that. That committee's not going to look very smart if Army goes 11-0, then loses the rivalry game to Navy and puts them in the playoff.
See, so let me just step in on this. This to me makes no sense. Why can't you say, if you're the committee, if Army's in, Army gets this spot. If Army loses, Boise State gets the spot. I don't know why you can't do that. That blows my mind.
Well, here's the
not
issue,
that complicated.
Here's the issue, Matt. Game preparation. That game would be played against Navy on December 14th. The first round of the playoffs is December 20th and 21st. Therefore, a team that's going to play Army and or Boise State in the opening round has all that time to prepare for their opponent, knowing, okay, we split half our staff to prepare for Army, half our staff prepares for Boise State, when they're only going to have a week to prepare for Texas.
And so it brings up the point that when the 12-team playoff format was announced, what should have happened? The AAC should have started its season in mid-August so that it could have its conference championship game on Thanksgiving weekend so that Army-Navy could be on December 7th. And everyone got what was asleep at the switch.
Yeah. Yeah. It was brought up to me this week, and I thought about it for a second because it's totally plausible. I'm not – obviously, I do think Notre Dame beats Army. But, it certainly is a plausible situation, especially with it being the Army-Navy game and being a game that's such a rivalry and could go either way. So
and those teams could also meet, as the real MVP is saying in the chat, in the conference championship game.
Right. That's correct. Yeah. Never could we see a really a more meaningful Army-Navy game in a long time, by the way, if that ends up being the case.
Yeah. Twice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's something. I think that would be really interesting.
It would be the biggest one since 1963.
That was the Roger Staubach game, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. All Okay, so let's get to kind of the lay of the land here and how this looks, gentlemen. So if we get Mark, we broached the chaos subject in the SEC, which is the possibility of 6 10-2 football teams. If Tennessee beats Georgia, I'm sorry, if Georgia beats Tennessee, let me flip that. Georgia beats Tennessee in Athens, and a Texas A&M beats Texas at home. Okay, we could have 6 10-2 football teams in the SEC, correct? Totally plausible at that
As was brought up earlier, if LSU sweeps, Georgia beats Tennessee, and Arkansas beats either Texas or Missouri, LSU is going to the SEC championship game.
Right.
That.
Correct. Well, I mean, I was just thinking of the possibility of the 6 10-2s, because where I was, well, LSU has 3 losses right now, so that's why I was kind of, and there's still a path there. I get where you're going with that, but now correct me if I'm wrong. If Texas A&M wins their last 2 games and beats Texas at home, would they then make it to the Georgia Dome?
Sure.
Okay.
They'd be 7-1.
Yeah, 7-1 in the conference, because their only other loss was out of conference to Notre Dame.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go that scenario and say we have 6 SEC teams, okay, at 10-2. Then we have the 4 Big Ten teams that we're talking about, okay, which is an 11-1 Penn State, an 11-1 Indiana, and then Ohio State, Oregon, however that turns out in Indianapolis. Okay. And those are the 4 teams in the Big Ten. So we got 10 there. Are we at that point thinking the ACC will only get 1 team and that the Big 12 will only get 1 team?
Unless Colorado and or Iowa State upset BYU in the Big 12 championship game, and BYU's 12-1.
Okay. Okay, so that creates an even more layer to this, because we know that 11-1 Notre Dame is probably going to get in, correct? Okay, so we know 11-1 Notre Dame, and we know if Boise State takes care of business, they're going to get in, correct?
Unless Army goes unbeaten.
Right. But remember, I said 11-1 Notre Dame, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. So, okay, yeah, as a package deal. Okay, sure.
Correct. So I guess I'm trying to kind of do the math here on the number of teams we've got fighting for 12 spots. That's where I'm going with this, guys.
Yeah.
So I'm going 6 SEC, 4 Big Ten, 1 ACC, 1 Big 12. Possibility of 2 Big 12 would bring us up to 13. And then we're looking at maybe Boise State, if they stay the course, as 14, Notre Dame is 15. Then we have a very interesting selection Sunday, I should say, to choose 12 teams out of 15. We get Mark's King of Chaos, and we have a very, very interesting Sunday to choose from.
Okay, well, it would actually be 14, right? Because Boise State gets the group of 5. Like, that is a reserved slot. It's not an at-large.
Well, correct. What I was saying is the possibility of having 2 Big 12 teams, as Mark just laid out, to get us up to the 15 number, for the committee to have to choose from 15 teams to cut down to 12.
Yeah. So, just I'm making the precise point that you're not really choosing Boise State. Boise State self selects. Like you're not. It's not. Boise State is not an at-large in the at-large pool because it's an automatic qualifier.
Correct. I guess the by and large is what I'm saying is out of those 15 teams, 3 teams are going to be SOL, and I'm just I'm trying to think of who the 3 teams that are going to be SOL here is, and now are we of the opinion? Clay Travis was talking about this, although Clay can be a big time SEC homer, but in any case, he had mentioned that a 10-2 SEC team takes precedent over an 11-1 Indiana.
So that was going to be my first point, is that I think we're making assumptions with Indiana 11-1 and even Notre Dame 11-1 with a loss to Northern Illinois and its best win being
Well, beating a 10-2 Texas A&M and beating an 11-1 Army.
11-1 Army, 10-2 Texas A&M, possibly a 9-3 Louisville, possibly. Okay. It's a little bit stronger of a schedule than.
Yeah, Notre Dame 11-1 is not getting left out.
No.
Yeah, I don't think that the committee is going to just be isolated on, okay, we're separating conferences and Indiana's safe at 11-1. Now we're going to focus on dwindling down this SEC pack. I think Indiana's part of that mix, depending on how well they perform or don't perform against Ohio State under this scenario.
I think we all agree. Indiana cannot lose by 30, 35 points to Ohio State and expect to be safe.
Okay. So if Indiana loses on a last-second field goal, that gets them the precedent over an SEC team that goes 10-2, might have a couple more quality wins.
I think
go ahead. I'm sorry.
What? Let's remember the SEC at-large pool is large right now.
Sure.
So it's not so much Indiana versus one 10-2 SEC team. It's Indiana against the pool of 10-2 SEC teams. And one extra variable is, is the SEC championship game going to knock one of those 10-2 teams out of the pool? Or, are you going to have a one-loss team that loses? That would be the nightmare for Indiana, right? A one-loss SEC team loses in the conference championship game and still has a solid profile with 2 losses. A 2-loss team beats the 1-loss team. That strengthens the full SEC at-large collection. That's the nightmare for Indiana.
Yeah, very plausible there, Matt, because if Tennessee goes to Athens and wins this week and they get to the Georgia Dome as a one-loss team, and then they're the one that's, let's say, that team that's knocked out.
Let's also consider the history of this committee and the way they've viewed things. And this would favor Indiana under your scenario of playing a close game against Ohio State, rather than simply taking it as this is Indiana's resume versus Ole Miss, Tennessee, etc., in which that would be a losing battle for Indiana, even though they had a better record at 11-1. I think the committee, if they rule in a way that they have in the past, would be more compelled to say, Indiana's had game control in all of these games outside of possibly Michigan to an extent, although they led the entire game. They've had game control, even though the opponents have been marginal. And then in their one opportunity against the number 1 team in the country, or 2 or 3, whatever they are at that point, they played a hell of a game and they showed us they can compete in a playoff. Punch the ticket.
Punch the ticket.
That's the way they've viewed things in the past, at least my interpretation of observing their, rather than, okay, we're going to go through the exact resume of Indiana versus Tennessee on down the line. Oh, Tennessee's got a stronger schedule and their 6th opponent's better than Indiana's 4th opponent.
Okay. Now, Indiana is still going to end up with, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere in the 90s as far as strength of schedule here, Mark, even after their last 2 games?
I don't know, but it sounds like it, because they're in the 100s now and Ohio State can only lift it so much, and then Purdue's going to send it the other direction.
Right. So you get to 97 or something strength of schedule. That's not, something to write home about. You know what I mean?
No. And everybody else's schedules are basically generally improving.
Right. Yeah. Generally. I mean, and you're hitching your star to, we went to Columbus and we lost by a field goal.
And the committee can also, I'm going to argue against myself, can also come back and just throw up their hands and basically say, schedule somebody outside the conference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody else is going to have that game. Everybody else is at least going to have that attempt. Tennessee beat NC State by a zillion points. Is that a great win? No, but they attempted. They went out and scheduled an NC State team that's typically 8-4, 9-3.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was going to, By the way, if Notre Dame goes 11-1, kind of outlining those quality wins, are we, as far as their seeding goes, again, Mark, they don't have a conference championship game. Do you think they at best end up somewhere at like 10 or 9? I guess we have to still see how it plays out, but I guess not having the conference championship game, it'd be interesting to see the best seed that they could probably play into with that record.
We're just going to have to wait a few weeks to see, but like, the committee is going to create like the sexiest possible television matchup, the best plot points, the best storyline. So, like, people might have arguments. Oh, this team should be an 11, not a 9, or this team should be an 8, not a 10. That they're just going to try and make the best television matchups. And so it's going to be interesting to see what the possibilities are when we get into early December.
I'll throw out a one. I think I'm going to go back and take a look at my preseason's picks that I did with Mark. What if Alabama has to come to South Bend?
Well, I was just going to say,
wow.
Look at the rankings right now.
Yeah.
Think about the decision the committee makes between choosing 8 and 9. And those resumes, we could sit here for 5 hours, I'm sure, once the conclusion of the season's been here, and say 8 versus 9, 9 versus 8. And that's the decision between Miami having to go to South Bend, Indiana and play versus that game being at Hard Rock and at 75 degrees. That's a huge decision.
Right. Miami,
and I would step in here. I would step in here on that precise point and say, I think that the committee is going to make the Southern team go to the Northern team precisely because that's what we haven't had in the existing bowl structure. So I'm going to call that shot right now if we have one of those 50-50 calls.
Well, the Midwestern folk have been talking this up for like a long period of time.
Yeah,
obviously.
so like everyone wants to see that.
This has been our wont here, is that let the Southern team come up here and play in the cold, come and play in South Bend in the snow in December and see how that works out for them. Now, I still think Alabama would go to Notre Dame and win, but
And
also, Alabama going to South Bend, like, oh man, you like wow. That's in December, like you gotta love it.
You can't write that script.
And also, you got to figure the committee's going to look at: do we want to see Tennessee and Alabama play again in a 7-10 matchup when we can just move one spot and create much different, interesting matchups? Bama, Penn State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, or Tennessee, Penn State, Alabama, Notre Dame, or whatever, versus, okay, Bama, Tennessee, rematch.
It brings up the point that there should have been a specific rule prohibiting conference matchups in the quarters or first round.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the committee will move that around. One last point on no, go ahead, Mark. Did you want to say something?
I was going to say, I found a website. I wish I should have bookmarked this. I found a website that went through the last, they went back to the beginning of the BCS era and modeled all the 12-team playoffs, who would have played on what campus, and they went and found the weather records for these games. It was fascinating, like 120 some games of playoffs. And they determined that there would have only been, I think it was 7 or 8 games that would have been affected by snow. And most of the snow was just snow flurries. There would have been 2 games that there would have been 2 or 3 games, significant snowfall accumulation. And one was a Florida State at Wisconsin game. That would have been tremendous.
Yes.
They said actually cold rain would have been more of an influence in like a couple dozen games, 38 degrees and raining and just nasty.
Well, that's been the argument, Mark, is, let them see what they can do. And now, I'm not going to say that's a be all end all. Usually, if they're the better football team, they're going to win, so. But I wanted to just, before I let you go, guys, I wanted to kind of offer my opinion. It was said earlier by our Texas guy about like teams that could plausibly win the national championship this year. And I do think there is parity, and me and Mark have talked about that before. I just want to say, and I've been hesitant, and Mark knows this, to say Tennessee is a national championship contender. I'm willing to say it if they do it this weekend. I will go out on that Tennessee limb if they go to Athens and win this weekend. And I know this isn't the Georgia team of the previous years, but if they go to Athens and win, I think that's a statement. And I would put them with Ohio State, Oregon, and Alabama, and maybe even above Texas at that point, because I still have to see Texas beat somebody. Now, if Texas goes to College Station and wins and gets a fairly solid win there, then I actually might be able to expand it to as many as 5 teams that could plausibly win the national title, which is, when was the last time we could say that going in? Thoughts, gentlemen?
Sounds reasonable to me. Yeah, I want to see Tennessee. Now, you're holding Tennessee to a different standard than Alabama, since Tennessee already beat Alabama, and you're considering Alabama to have already reached that category. But, we can crisscross teams all night. So I think it's reasonable to want to see Texas and Tennessee perform. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think to go into a 12-team playoff in a year where we could say there's 5 teams that could plausibly win a national championship, maybe the P word is here, in college football, which how many times have we used that word, the parity word, to describe, where we're at with a playoff? And the designers of the 12-team playoff would probably, and now we'd have to see what kind of games we're going to get in the early rounds and in the quarters and the semis, hopefully not the blowouts we got in so many, playoff games for all those years. But so.
All right, David. Appreciate you being here.
All right, gentlemen. Great discussion as always. Really enjoy it, Mark. Good to see you, Matt.
Yep. Mark and everyone, I have some other commitments, but it's been great to hop on. I just want to say, go to Trojans Wire for John Robinson remembrances. We remember, pay tribute to a legend of the game, not just USC, John Robinson. There's plenty to read there at Trojans Wire. So thanks everybody for listening. And Mark, thanks for having me here at the Voice of College Football.
Thanks for being here for us, Matt. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. A lot of fun. Take care, everybody.
All right. We can take this final call right here. Christopher's on the line. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, sir.
Hey, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine. I missed most of your show. I apologize, Mark.
No need to apologize.
I don't know if it was my phone or technical difficulties. I was looking for it. I couldn't find it. I caught onto it like right before David came on, and I've only really heard his comments. I'm a little upset, and I don't want to make anybody mad, but it just seems to me, Mark, and you don't have to share my opinion because I understand you have strong convictions, and I respect you as a person. I really do. I think you're a very intelligent guy.
I appreciate it.
Even like in NFL, I think the Super Bowl, and I don't want to get off track here. I understand you like to keep things, on the level, but why does that make somebody decided the Super Bowl makes the or I know it's not national championship, but why? You could have, and I don't want to get into that because that's a whole nother topic, but what I'm getting into, and I'll try to get it straight into it, BYU, if they win, and I don't think they will, I think to win, 12, 13 games, that's hard for anybody. And they have 4 tough teams ahead of them. And it's going to be next to impossible, really, for them to finish those. Why do they have to, if they do it, which I don't think they will, why after winning, if they go 13-0, which I don't think they will, in all fairness, why do they have to play another, what would it be, 3 more games? To me, it's like asking the impossible. If they can go 13-0, why can't they play, let's just say it's Oregon. I don't know if it will be. Why isn't that enough for anybody? I don't get it, Mark. I really don't. And it's making me kind of half mad because, oh no, well, yeah, they beat 13 good teams, but they didn't play Alabama, or they didn't play Ohio State, or they didn't play, at some point, I kind of think that the whole process is screwed up, and I don't want to beat a horse to death or whatever, Mark, but is this just because BYU won a kind of a controversial championship in '84 and we're going to make sure that never happens again? Is that the idea? We'll never let that happen again. That was a bad deal, I guess. Or am I just way off base on this one?
So there's 2 reasons we have a playoff, Chris. One would be that people want to make money. So money drives most of this.
I don't think they're going to make much money with it. I really don't. I don't think people are going to care that much about a playoff. I don't.
People aren't going to care.
I don't think the FCS makes any money off their playoff. I don't think people care about it.
Oh, the TV ratings are going to be astronomical.
I don't think so. I don't. I think, I know a little bit about what it was like for me. I can base it on me. Once I played 6 games, I really never did because I was always getting hurt and stuff. To me, that was a season. You know what I mean? I didn't want to play 6 more games after 6 games. I can't speak for everybody else. I think this whole idea of a playoff, I think it was a terrible idea. Whoever came up with the idea, I don't know who it was. I think even you brought into it with 84. You thought, well, let's have a 16 team. Actually, and I did the research on it. I don't think 16 teams would have been enough to fill the bracket. I think you'd had to go to 32. So BYU to be a national champion in 84 would have had to win another 5 games. They would have had to be an 18-0 to claim a title. Just to be, a bracket, a complete bracket that includes all the deserving teams would have been another, 5 games, I guess. Why do we need a playoff? I don't understand it. And nobody's been able to explain that to me. Maybe you can do it.
Let me do my best. Okay. One is a real world situation. And again, I'm going to finish what I started to say concerning money. There is money to be made. There is a appetite by the American sports fan to see college football playoff games and to watch the games in droves of millions of people that advertisers are paying. Therefore, there will be tons of money. This is going to create more revenue than anything ever in collegiate athletics. Okay?
All right, I did because I did the homework, Mark. I kind of want you to give me a little credit for the homework I did. You don't have to agree with what I'm about to tell you. Actually, whatever they paid, it was like $7.8 billion for the what? What you can maybe help me figure it out.
Are you talking about the Big Ten contract?
No, I'm talking about the.
That sounds like the Big Ten contract, $7.8 billion.
I'm talking about the playoff that's supposed to run through like.
Okay.
Anyway, BCS, and I know you don't like the BCS, and so I'm not going to twist your arm on that one. And some people don't. I understand maybe it wasn't the perfect situation, but economically, for the same amount of money, I think if I remember correctly, if I did the math correctly, which I think I did, instead of what was the contract good for, Mark? Was it 6 or 9 years? Anyway, you get an extra 3 years, I think, for the BCS than you would with CFP. And it's not because BCS is necessarily, it's just, it's a better deal. It really is. I mean, it doesn't cost, playoffs are probably, in all fairness, probably a lot less expensive to stage a playoff. That's probably true. But, I really don't think that people are going to be, I'm not going to be that interested in playoff. You want to know why? Because after like 12 weeks of football, I think there's like some people, I don't think I'm alone in this one. It's like, okay, basketball's already starting up. Not everybody's going to be watching football. Basketball's starting up right now. Some people are actually watching basketball as we talk. Not everybody's going to care about this stupid playoff, and I'm sure you've heard the expression cut to the chase. And you can use whatever example you want. You could give me any year you want to use. You can use 84. You can use whatever year you think that there should have been a playoff. And I could probably give you just as good an argument as why there shouldn't have been one. And I'm not promoting BYU, in all fairness. Washington could have played BYU for the national championship knowing fully well what the ramifications were, and they chose not to. Whose fault is that? They were invited to play the game, and they just chose not to. It's like, okay, well, let's punish BYU because they couldn't find somebody better. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But anyway, regardless, Mark, I really think for any team to play more than, there's only a number of games that it's, how many games do you think you could play if you were, or even coach, and play at the very best of your ability and reasonably and expect to win every game? Do you think you could win 18 games? Because that's what people are saying. That's basically what you're telling me BYU needed to do to be a national champion, is win 18 games in a row.
Okay.
Am I being too, well, go ahead.
Again, let's just end with the one point that this will be an enormous money maker. There is no question about that.
No, it won't. I'm almost positive it won't, Mark. It'll be less expensive to, Bowls were I think bowls were quite a bit more expensive I think it takes more money to put on a bowl game than it does a playoff game, because you're having them in these, they cut money. It's like the what?
Okay.
But
yes.
I think you're wrong about people going to be, so care. I don't think they're going to care any more than they would normally. I don't think they're just going to, okay.
I'm not wrong
Mark,
about
it doesn't
this.
make sense to me.
We will see when the TV ratings and the finances come out.
Fair. That's fair. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong, but you might.
We already have the finances in play, and we already know what these networks are willing to pay because the contracts are already signed. It's only at this point about the networks trying to recoup their money. But the networks have already signed up for the amount of money that they're going to be paying college football, and it's astronomical.
No, it really isn't. But regardless of that,
yes, it is astronomical.
It really isn't. But regardless of that, for 7.8 billion, just listen to me, Mark. For 7.8 billion, they could get a 3 additional years of the BCS. I did the homework. I'm not completely stupid. You know, you get it. I don't know. You can say it's not a better deal. Fine. I don't really care. But it is better in terms of what you get from it. And what was it good for? Like 6 years? I think it was only 6 years. I'm giving you 9 years is what I'm doing. I guess it's not really me. But 9 years with probably a more definitive. Yeah, I'm saying we go back to the BCS. I don't think there was anything wrong with the BCS. I know you hated it. But because Mark Rogers hates the BCS, that means we need to change it. Did we really get a better result? Maybe you can help me understand that. And you can pick any year you want to pick. I know what the result of it was for CFP. You know what it did? It changed it from being a BCS arrangement to the belt. And I know you don't like the belt, which is kind of weird.
Again, to finish the money conversation of this is going to be an astronomical success. And it already is because all the contracts are already signed and the money is being transferred from the networks to college football.
I already know it won't be a success because the FCS isn't successful and they use a playoff. In fact,
nobody cares about the FCS.
Well, I don't, Mark. I'm not even going to go.
There's no comparison between the two levels of play and how many people are interested in it.
Telling me that
that's a completely ridiculous argument to make.
But it doesn't really matter to me because you're probably right about I already know. See, I've done my homework, Mark. If I hadn't done my homework, then I should just shut the hell up. But I've done the homework on this. I think I've spent more hours probably than anybody on the planet on this trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. The reason the FCS sucks is there's such a big difference in ability between, it's like a 10-point or 9, it's like 10 to 1 or 9 to 1, something like that. 10 to 1, I think. That's huge. You know what it is between G5 and P5? 2 to 1. So you go from 10 to 1 to 2 to 1. That's why G5 is relevant. It's only 2 to 1 difference in terms of potential.
Okay. So anyway, we've put the money argument to bed. That's again not debatable.
I just told you I'm going to give you 3 additional years for the same amount of money that you're paying for 6 years of the CFP. I'm giving you 3 additional years, boosting it to 9. That's what is that? That's like from 6 to 9. I'm giving you a better.
Okay, let's speak clearly here, Chris. What did the BCS? How much money did that generate? I'm taking your word for it.
I think if I remember correctly, when ESPN, you're the one that worked there, I think they paid a relatively paltry sum but that's, in a way, that's not bad because that's like saving money. It's like you don't have to spend as much money. You're right. It wasn't like a huge, great, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad
You're making my point for me. We're not arguing for the side of the television network saving money. We're on the side of saying that this is a good move for college football because the television networks are willing to fork over zillions of dollars for this product.
Just listen to me one more time, Mark. And I'm not lying to you. For the same amount of money, 7.8 billion, you get three additional years. That's 3 more years rather than 6. 7.8 billion for 6 years. I'm giving you 3. I'm not doing it, obviously, but for the same amount of money, you're getting 3. How can you tell me that's not a better
Chris,
deal?
let me explain this to you. If your numbers are accurate, so we're going to assume that your numbers are accurate.
Well, Mark, I'm not a complete idiot. They're right. They are right.
Okay, your numbers are accurate for sake of argument.
They are right.
Okay. The BCS is delivering how many games during those seasons?
I didn't count them. How many games do they deliver?
They only deliver 1 game, one championship game.
True. Come on, Mark. That's not 5 games per year. You know that. Don't lie to me.
Okay. So how many years are you making a comparison between the BCS?
I'm not paying between years. I'm just taking the same amount of money instead of wasting it on a stupid playoff.
So how many years at the same amount of money, how many years
I told you
did that cover for the BCS?
if my numbers are, I'll be as fair as you are to me. If my numbers are correct, then rather for 6 years for 7.8 billion, I'm giving you 9. And
Okay,
it's really
6
not
years.
anything I'm doing. It's just
Okay.
what yeah.
Okay, so you're saying for the equivalent of 6 years of the
14
college
team
football playoff
The 14 team
equates to 9 years of the BCS. Is that what you're telling me?
That's what I determined to
Okay.
be. And that's
Okay.
without me trying to fudge numbers or trying
Time
to
out.
play with the numbers or
Time
trying to
out. Time out. Okay, we'll say your numbers are perfect.
They are correct, but whatever.
Okay. 9 years of the BCS is how many bowl games were in the BCS?
Well, I don't know, Mark. I'm telling you.
Rose,
I don't really look at it from that
sugar,
perspective.
cotton. So let's say there were 5. I forget how many. It depends on the time frame of the BCS in a BCS championship game.
Not really, because the BCS, what they did was it was limited to 10 teams in 5 games, so it would have been 5.
So there you go, 5 games per season for 9 years.
I took it up to 9 years, yeah, but it wasn't really something I did. It's just how
so
much.
that's 45 games, correct?
Well, if you don't include all the other games, I guess so.
Well,
I mean, the BCS.
we're not including the other games.
Well,
45. There were 45 BCS games during that time frame, correct? 9 years, 5 games per season.
Around for 16 years, and it had different formats. And
you just told me that the study you did was for 9 years of the BCS, correct?
No, I'm not. I'm
Chris, you just got done saying
no.
You've been rambling for 20 minutes telling me that whatever little study you did was for 9 years of the BCS compared to 6 years for the college football playoff. Is that not correct?
Not exactly. I took the same money and I said, well, let's just say that we didn't go. What I basically did was, instead of playing this playoff, which I don't think we need, it's like selling something that we don't need. It's ridiculous.
Okay, you're talking in circles. How many years of the BCS did you compare to how many years of the college football playoff?
Well, the playoff's going to be for 6 years. So I said, well, what if we spent that money instead of on a 14-team playoff that nobody really wants? How about if we just apply
that nobody wants?
Yeah, nobody.
Well, that's a freaking ignorant, dumb ass complete statement that I've heard tonight.
I'm not calling you a dumbass, so I don't really appreciate it when you start calling me.
I didn't call you a dumbass. I just said you made a dumbass statement.
Well, it's basically the same thing.
Okay. Anyway. Again, let me be clear and try to determine what you're telling us. 9 years of the BCS in finances is equivalent to 6 years of the playoff, is what you're telling me, correct?
No. All right. I'll try to explain it another way. I did my very best to apply a scale that I thought was representative of what the CFP was delivering compared to the BCS. I applied it in a proactive way towards what I projected to see the BCS to use if it was still in place. And yeah, we get 9 years of what the BCS would offer compared to 6 of what the playoff does.
Okay. All right.
And that's not me lying to you.
Over the course of 9 years of the BCS, there would be 45 football games, correct?
Well, the BCS itself, Mark, it really
just to answer the question. Over 9 years of the BCS, there would be 45 football games in the BCS. 5 per year for 9 years is 45 games. Okay. 6 years of a college football playoff of 12 teams, I believe, is an 11-game playoff per year. Times 6 is 66 games. So there's a value of 21 more football games.
I don't know, Mark. I don't really want to get into that argument with you because it doesn't really go anywhere.
Because you're going to lose.
You're not wrong, but it's like, who cares? Is kind of the way I look at it.
Who cares? You're the one who brought it all up.
No, I'm telling you, for the same amount of money, we could get 9 years of the BCS compared to 6 years of a 14-team playoff.
And you get 21 more. And you get 21. If your numbers are correct, you get 21 more games of college football playoff games.
I don't know how many games. I don't really think of it that way. I mean, you might be right. I don't know.
Well, that's what television advertisers deal with, is per game, not per season.
Well, I'm not necessarily the whole BCS itself. There's kind of a tie-in, I think, between. I know you don't look at it this way. I know when the BCS was still around, because so many of the other bowl games really didn't make any money or lost money. Really, the BCS kind of in a roundabout way applied to every bowl game is really kind of what it did. So really, I don't really care how many games that we're talking about. kind of like you're saying 66 games. Okay, fine, whatever. That's like discounting, I guess, every other bowl game that isn't part of the BCS, but whatever. If you want to look at it that way, that's fine, I guess. I don't know that I really care about that part. But anyway, regardless, for the same amount of money, we could get 9 years of what the BCS was, or it could be, really more what it could be, compared to the 6 years that we're getting with the playoff, which in my opinion kind of proves that the BCS was a better deal. Now, if you don't want to share my opinion, that's fine, but don't say
It's
I'm a dumbass.
not a better deal because college football is making in 6 years of playoff. If your numbers are correct, college football is making in 6 years what it made in 9 years of the BCS.
No, that's cost. That's how much it's going to cost for 6 years of it.
But they're going to make so much more money. It's not even comparable.
I don't think
it's
so, Mark.
Not what you think doesn't matter. I'm telling you, real world finances.
I'm telling you, real world finances.
No, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yes, Mark, I don't think
let's cut to the chase here. I've been way too kind here.
No,
you don't know what in the hell you're talking about. You have no idea. You are completely clueless on the topic. You don't know what you're talking about. You have zero idea. You know nothing about the topic.
I do know a lot about the topic.
There was a 12-team playoff determined first and foremost because money was going to be made hand over fist. That is the number one factor. The number two factor is because playoffs decide championships more fairly than people voting.
No,
those are the two overriding impacts of all of this. The college football public got sick of sports writers who had no idea what they were doing voting for national championships, and they wanted to see the teams play on the field. Those are the two overriding factors of why we have a playoff right now. Number one, it will make a hell of a lot of money. Number two, it is the way you decide who the best team is by putting teams on the field to play games, not to vote on who is the best team, but to actually have the teams on the field playing football.
Mark, if you're going to be so rude to me about it, I'm going to go back to one more game just for fun. You know, this isn't to be like a jerk. It isn't to be, I already told you, when BYU played in that, I think what the playoff is for is so that BYU can't win it, is what I think it is.
Yes.
You're going to ask
all
me.
Concerned about BYU.
You know, they're probably,
this has all been created. This entire, all of this, the TV networks, college football, every conference has it out for BYU.
No,
that is the entire concoction. You have pinpointed it. You nailed it.
I don't know if I did, Mark, but let's just say BYU. I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they have 4 tough games ahead of them. Four tough games. I don't know that they can win even 2 of them. They might not win any.
4 tough games. Are they going to play Texas Tech again, or is it Cincinnati, or is it Arizona?
It's Houston, but it doesn't.
Houston, yes.
Yes, though that's not
absolutely.
A tough team. Okay, let's make Houston sucks because let's find out why again. Because
they just suck.
No, they don't. That's your bias creeping into it. They don't
suck. Okay. I only have so many brain cells to lose in one 24-hour time frame.
Listen to me, Mark. If you're going to hang up on me, then just let me finish my thought, if you don't mind.
Okay. If it is actually a coherent thought, I would gladly like to hear it because it would be the first one.
Who was it? Who was it? That Adam guy that said something? I don't know what he was getting at. It was the stupidest thing I think I've heard in my life. That South Carolina would prove that they were better than BYU because who was it? South Carolina beat? I don't even know who it was. Was it Georgia? Anyway, I don't think it was. But you know, if it's about the best team at the time, he said, "Oh, they're the best team now," or some bullshit. You know who the best team is actually right now? It's Mississippi. You want to know why? Because they beat Georgia, and that's if you want to make it.
They've got the belt championship. That's right.
What the belt is. I mean, if you want to.
So in 2 weeks, when Ole Miss plays Mississippi State, one of the worst teams in college football, if Mississippi State just happens to win that game, they will suddenly be the best team in college football.
The belt elevates the team that would ordinarily not be the best to the top. That's what the belt is. I mean,
the belt is a novelty. It's a fun little thing to keep track of. It is meaningless.
It has a lot of meaning to it.
Meaningless. If that's what you wasted your last coherent thought on, then we appreciate you calling, Chris.
Okay, Mark, that's fine. And just don't call me dumbass. All right.
Have a good night.
Bye.
All right. I was being kind by calling him a dumbass. That's the thing. That was the kindest thing I could possibly say. Why do we need playoffs? Yes, the NBA got it wrong. The NFL got it wrong. Major League Baseball got it wrong. The NHL. I used to argue when my precious little daughter was 8 or 9 years old playing park and rec softball that they even had a playoff. They even had the logic to say, you know what, we're going to have a tournament at the end of the year. They even knew that that's how you decide who the best team is. You actually allow the best teams from the regular season, whether it's the best 4 or the best 8 or the best 12, whatever the number is, you take the best of the regular season and then you have them actually play games against each other. It's called a playoff, and it works quite well. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, folks. And we will do this again, of course, next Tuesday night. And we'll see what kind of calls we get next Tuesday night that will bring me to a fever pitch. But appreciate you being here. Let's see. We got a Wednesday that's loaded up. Ohio State Buckeyes live at 11. We've got our Florida State show at 6. Whoa. Ohio State at 11. Ole Miss at 2. Florida State at 6. Miami at 7. Notre Dame at 8. Whew. Got my work cut out for me on Wednesday, and I wanted to get to Big Ten power rankings, and I wanted to run down all the various situations across college football. And if I can make my way through and navigate that live stream schedule on Wednesday, then we will deliver some of those scenarios. Otherwise, we will get to those on Thursday. So keep it locked in here at the Voice of College Football. We are working hard for all of you. And so please like the video and subscribe. And also, please tell your neighbors and friends and family and social media acquaintances that we are here talking college football all the time, 24/7, 365. And we've got quite a network with a lot of you fine folks engaged, involved, and hosting shows and in the chat. And I see a lot of great names here. I see Dave E. and all sorts of other good people that we have on a regular basis that we've been welcoming into our Voice of College Football community for many years. I don't know that I can utter another coherent word at this point. It's 11:30 Eastern time, and shoot, I have obviously been on much later than this, but I think we have pretty much tapped it out for a night. But we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Look at Cheryl's in the chat too. That's always great to see. Michael, good to see you. Adam, anybody I missed? Hey, thanks for being here at the Voice of College Football. Jackson, thank you for your hard work and keeping everyone updated with links. Of course, keep in mind that I've got a book, Disputed National Champions, that I think everyone except Chris would enjoy. I think all the rest of you would enjoy this book except Chris, Disputed National Champions, a historical reset of the 1990s. And again, it's not just a history book, but it is a look forward in placing all these results from the 1990s into the BCS, the 14 playoff era, and the 12 team and the 14 team that is being proposed. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Next stop is Ohio State Buckeyes Live, Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern.